way you can change the let's get some real football teams up front there. Some teams that can actually win games. Put them up there. Let's do that. There we go. Welcome into the Voice of College Football on a Thursday night. Appreciate everybody being here for post-game. We are going to have a nice, tight, sweet post-game, so I'm going to leave the call-in number, the call-in link in the live chat, and I invite and welcome all of you to give me a call or just hang out, listen to the conversation, and leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. Got, for those of you that are not football brainiacs, not really hardcore college football fans, not hardcore football fans that would understand this level of analysis, hang with me here. After taking in the Virginia-Georgia Tech game, I am guessing that you either are asleep right now. You would not have tuned me in then. You set your alarm, or you just happened to break out of your slumber, or you're extremely annoyed and aggravated from watching that inept display of offensive football. What could the other options be? But I'll simply say this. Virginia beat Georgia Tech by a touchdown, 16-9. Okay. Georgia Tech dropped a ton of passes. Virginia's receivers dropped a ton of passes. If either one of those teams, and obviously Virginia got away with it, would have caught half of the passes they dropped, Georgia Tech, even despite Jeff Sims not playing in the game once he got knocked out in the first or second quarter, would have been able to win the game. And for Georgia Tech, it was actually a pretty big game. Had they won this game, they would have been 3-1 with still a date against North Carolina, the 3-0 North Carolina Tar Heels, to win the vaunted ACC Coastal Division. But Georgia Tech loses. They're 2-2. For Virginia, hey, season's pretty much shot at 1-3 anyway. All right. Again, welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got bigger and better things to talk about concerning Week 8 of college football. Week 8. We'll talk about all the matchups that you would like us to talk about. So let's get on it. Keep in mind the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. So please grab that link that, again, is in the description section of all the videos. Grab that Amazon link. Put it somewhere where you will remember it. And then when you shop on Amazon, keep this in mind. It's exactly the same as if you would do so otherwise. So how you shop on Amazon right now, just replace it with the link that we provide. It's the same exact deal. It's not going to cost you a penny, not going to do anything different to your shopping experience. Same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny. Use the link in Amazon. Perfect. All right. Ole Miss, Ohio State, and Tennessee take the top shelf this week. The Buckeyes take on Iowa. Check out the segment that we posted with Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. We posted it on both the Ohio State and the Iowa channels because there are some ridiculous betting anomalies in this Ohio State-Iowa game. The Iowa offense continues to give us more and more statistical anomalies every week, with every week of more ineptness. The Iowa offense gives us more statistical anomalies. So for the betting portion of you out there, these are some statistics that Steve told us today that, and again, check out the videos on the Iowa channel, on the Ohio State channel. They're like 3-minute videos. Check them out. Because if you're into that, then if you're into wagering, betting the games, you cannot miss the segments that we deliver with Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. Cannot miss them. Even if you're not going to bet on that particular game, even if you're not going to bet, but you just find that interesting, because I've not bet on a football game in 7 or 8 years. But I still find all of that fascinating, much like the stock market that has taken so much of my money in the last 2 years. 2 years, yeah, a year and a half. I still find it fascinating. So I was the 30-point underdog against Ohio State. Iowa only gives up an average of 9 points a game, and they're a 30-point underdog, meaning that they are supposed to lose by more than 3 times the amount of points that they give up in a game. That's a ridiculous statistic right there. On top of that, Iowa games are only averaging 23 points. The Iowa games, both teams put together 23 points. Iowa has won their games by an average of 14-9. They only play games that average 23 points, and they're a 30-point underdog in this game. And we could go on and on and on and on and on. I don't expect that we're going to talk too much Iowa football during the call-in show. It wore me out to talk about the Iowa offense during the entire offseason before they even played a game, because I knew they'd be bad, but not this bad. But again, we saw Iowa-like football tonight out of Georgia Tech and Virginia. Georgia Tech basically dropped more passes than Virginia and also lost Jeff Sims in the balance. Their backup quarterback was not up to the challenge. He looked awful. He took 8 sacks. Many of them were his issue. And then late in the game, he started to hit some passes. But you know what? They dropped the passes. Curious final play if you were watching that game. So Georgia Tech's driving down the field. They get a few plays. They basically are in panic mode, can't win the game. They got the ball back with 36 seconds left, down by a touchdown, no timeouts left. They got a couple first downs, and then they had like kind of the Hail Mary kind of shot with about 5 seconds left. He drops back to pass. He gets flushed to the left, and with no time left in the game, down by a touchdown, he ran out of bounds. Did you see that? He ran out of bounds. Could have just throw the ball down the field and pray. Throw the ball down the field and pray. Just throw it up in the air. You cannot win if you run the ball out of bounds down by a touchdown with no time left. You can possibly tie the game and go into overtime or win with a 2-point conversion if you just chuck the ball down the field. You can possibly win. You can't if you run the ball out of bounds with no time left. Get the Amazon link, and please use our link when you shop on Amazon. We are going to do a nice, tight show tonight. Let's see, it is 11:20. Unless we have reason to go on, we are going to go for 40 strong minutes and pop the cork at midnight. That's what we're going to do unless we have reason to continue. So I have dropped the link there in the comment section of the live chat. Please give me a call. We've got DeAndre on the line. Let's start with DeAndre. Mr. BGPO Football Funk, appreciate you being here. Are you in a cave? What are you doing? Can you turn a light on or something, DeAndre? We would love
Mark, how you doing, man?
Can see you smile. How'd your show go tonight?
Oh, we went great. That's what I was calling to talk to you about. So
okay, so before you say anything else, DeAndre, we want everyone to know where they can find you and Jobo and everybody else there. So get on over to the Clemson channel. DeAndre, Jordan, Edward, and I apologize, I don't know the other gentleman's name.
Smitty.
Yeah. You got Smitty. I will never forget that now. Smitty, Edward, who I don't believe goes by Eddie, Edward, DeAndre, and Jordan Bowman.
Jordan Bowman.
Preview all the Clemson games, and they were over there tonight, so check out their work. Okay. It's all you, sir.
Earlier in the season, before the season got started, me and you had a discussion about Joe Burrow and Kenny Pickett. Do you remember that conversation about how they had poor?
Yes, I do. Yep.
So now, me and some of the guys, we got a disagreement, and I'm sure you're going to share it on the show. But I was trying to tell them that I think that DJ probably will go pro after this year if he keeps up the progress that he made for last year. And the reason why I say that, if you look at the last couple of quarterbacks that have been drafted, Tua is small, and yes, he has a nice arm, but he throws a lot of short passes. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, he kind of struggles and stuff like that. Even I think Kenny Pickett's kind of small. Joe Burrow, he does a great job. He got a nice arm. But DJ is more a prototypical quarterback than he is a one of those new age quarterbacks. And I said I think he's gonna go pretty high. And I'm not saying he's better than Young or Stroud, but he's bigger and more physical. So let's take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for example. And there might be a late round pick, like a late first round pick, and they say they disagree with me. So I want to get your thoughts on that question. What do you think if DJ were to go? Where do you think that he would come out? Obviously, Bryce Young fraud is better statistically 2 years better than DJ. However, because of the size and the arm strength, what do you think about that?
Is really Bryce Young statistically better than DJ? Am I going to have to go to the stats on that to verify that? Really? I'm just
probably
kidding.
will.
It's not even close. It's not even close, DeAndre. Yes, I was joking there. Bryce Young, yeah, threw 47 touchdowns and 4 picks last year, and DJ threw what 9 TDs and 10 picks, and having a much better season this year. Okay, well, yeah, he's a durable guy, or at least we can project in the NFL that DJ is going to be a durable guy because he's huge. What was he, 265 last season and slimmed down to about 230?
Yep.
6'5"?
Right.
And Bryce Young's more like 6'2".
190, 200.
Yeah. He'll get bigger, but not much. He's only got so much of a frame. All right.
Because I know you more stick to college football, which I do too.
Yeah, I'm not a big draft guy. I love the NFL, but I'm not a big. Now I love the draft, but I'm not like a draft projection guy.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, if you go look at out Tom Brady's 6'6", was 210, and maybe 6'4".
Yeah,
but
6'4". Yeah,
they're guys. And look at the struggles that some of the smaller quarterbacks have had, like Baker Mayfield, go on such and such. Some of the other guys, Kyler Murray, and you have to change so much from a traditional offense that you need that. So I'm just saying, if you were to put DJ, let's say with the Tennessee Titans with Derrick Henry, with the good offensive line, the good receivers, and let him throw the ball down the field. He's more of a traditional quarterback than the other guys. I mean, think about it. There was no quarterback outside of Kenny Pickett that went on the first round, and I think DJ is more of a pro-style quarterback than Kenny Pickett was, or more physically gifted than Kenny Pickett was, or Joe Burrow.
I agree with that. Yeah. I do think that there's less a distinction between college ball and the NFL than there was years ago for 2 different reasons.
Right.
I think that the college game has impacted and influenced the NFL game, and they're difficult to really tell the difference between watching football on Saturday and watching football on Sunday, as opposed to in the late 2000s, let's say 08, 09, unless you're watching Wisconsin, Alabama, or LSU play. If you're watching Florida or Auburn or a number of West Coast teams play, Oregon, of course, and then you're watching the NFL on Sunday, you're watching 2 different sports. But now the NFL's borrowed a lot from college football. And so the transition's not, from a stylistic standpoint, from a scheme standpoint, isn't that much of a jump or a difference than it used to be, number one. Number two, the smaller, more mobile running quarterback is more accepted in the NFL. They don't brush those guys off now.
Yeah, that's true. But I go back to, let's look at Allen at Buffalo. Look at Baltimore. They don't want to pay Lamar Jackson his money because he is that running style quarterback. Look how often Tua gets hurt because of his size. There are several other quarterbacks. Don't get me wrong, because Drew Brees was a small quarterback, and I know they had passing windows for him, but that's just something I want to take up. And I'm going to let you go, but I do got another question for you, and I brought it up tonight on Close to Live Show. Syracuse, I think Syracuse. I know they only had one national championship. I think it was 1942, somewhere around there, or
Syracuse 59,
1960,
right? I thought it was 59.
59, 59. So I was telling the guys, I said Syracuse does not get a lot of respect for. I know 19 up to 1986. After integration, they were kind of misforgot. But so Syracuse has some amazing football that came out of there or that went there. Why are they just like people just forget how good of a program they used to be because they haven't been great lately?
Okay, well, I'll put it this way. Who is like Syracuse, meaning who was really good back then that has had a drought now for 20 plus years, basically since Donovan McNabb, they've not been a top 10 level team.
Right.
So if you can compare somebody to Syracuse, I'm just going to let you know basically that anybody like that is going to be forgotten because they haven't been any good for, when I say any good, they've gone to bowl games, but that's it for a long time.
Let me ask you. Okay, you say that Washington and Minnesota.
Washington just
I
went to
know
the playoffs 6 years ago.
like 20 before that they were terrible though, weren't they?
Washington went to the Fiesta Bowl in 2017. They went to the Rose Bowl in 2018. They went to the College Football Playoff in 16.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota. Okay. Whoop. It's not the way I wanted it to look. But anyway, well, Minnesota, does anybody pay much attention to Minnesota?
No, but I mean, PJ Fleck gets a lot of attention. But I would just ask them because they do have a big football history. I just don't understand. And maybe because people don't follow football like we do, and we know all the historical players that came out of Syracuse and Pitt and a couple of those other schools that are now forgotten because they haven't kept up with the times. I would just wonder, but yeah, for the most part, that's all I was asking.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you buy my second answer?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Do you buy my second answer? That if you're saying Syracuse has a great football tradition and history, but hasn't been good in a long time, why are people ignoring Syracuse? And I said, well, who's similar to Syracuse? You brought up Washington. I didn't buy Washington at all. Minnesota.
I say Washington.
Who's paying too much attention to Minnesota that's not a hardcore college football fan?
Yeah, I agree with you. But I think about Washington is, I think was it 94? Like after 94, like they were just, I mean, I don't remember. It just seemed like Washington had like a bad fall off. Nebraska, maybe. I mean, I know they have been good sometimes in the 2000s, but I mean, I just see like a lot of times people don't realize how good Syracuse football used to be. I mean, they used to go
again,
Florida.
People can remember, a lot of people that are on here can remember back to Nebraska contending for national championships and winning national championships 25 years ago. But Syracuse, right. 1959.
Right.
And Nebraska has played in 3 conference championship games in the last 13 or 14 years.
Yeah. A couple more years, ain't nobody going to remember that. Well,
yeah, just you and me, DeAndre. Just you and me.
Yes, sir. All right, Mark. You have a great night, man.
I appreciate you being here, man. Thank you. Oh, it's the dreaded double click. When the viewer clicks at the same time that I click, it automatically goes to the next person, which is fine. All right, Tree Star, how you doing tonight?
Good. How about you?
I am doing just fine. What's going on tonight?
I wanted to ask about your. I think you on your rankings that actually make sense. I think you did it again where you put Kansas State above Tulane and switched it for the 3rd time in a row. I think
switched it.
Well, like at first you had Kansas State above Tulane the first time Kansas State was in the rankings. I think I went back to Tulane, and I think it's back to Kansas State above them.
Okay, you're partially right. You're not completely right.
I'm not. No,
Did we have this conversation a couple weeks ago?
we've had this conversation multiple times.
All right, let me explain myself. Okay.
But like you have Kansas State ahead again, don't you?
So for everybody listening that cares anything, gives a damn about the top 25 that actually makes sense, which was butchered this week because we've had a lunatic who got involved in our videos and a complete moron and idiot tried to sabotage the channel and deleted. I don't know who saw the message. I posted it here on the YouTube channel and also on Twitter that deleted 14 live streams and videos. So anyway, and the reason I didn't repost most of those is for anybody that understands YouTube, just believe me that if I reposted those and they're dated, meaning who watches a Penn State Michigan analysis went the Wednesday after the game. Obviously, I did it on Saturday. We had about 22,000 views on that video. Then it was sabotaged. I'm not going to repost it because this is what happens. If like 500 people watch it, then YouTube's going to basically sound the alarm that nobody cares about my channel and they're going to suppress the video. So what I may do is like not release a video for like 3 or 4 days to let that kind of flush out the system. Because anyway, that's the deal. Anyway, back to your question. Top 25 that actually makes sense. So I did repost that and only about 700 or 800 people watched it because they watched the original posting. So here's what happened. I think I explained that I have done my very best and have adhered to a T to the head-to-head wins. Whoever wins the head-to-head will always be higher ranked as long as their record is better or the same. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I've adhered to that for 5 or 6 years, however long we've done this. Through the Ohio State-Oregon example last year. Then we had this Tulane Kansas State situation. After what, maybe this was game 3, I believe. Week 3, game 3 for each.
I can't remember exactly when they played, but yeah, I'm sure you're right.
Tulane beat Kansas State. Yeah, the final non-conference game for each team.
Yeah.
Tulane wins 17-10 on the road. Okay. Both teams then proceed to not lose another game. Tulane, though, did lose another game to Southern Miss. Okay. So I recognized my rule and I ranked Tulane above Kansas State. But what happened was, okay, the more games are played after that, the more other teams have to be considered and come into the equation.
Sure.
Follow that? Like when there's only one game played, then you could just
you can just do that.
The teams are much separated. When everybody's only played one game and you just have to evaluate one game. And then 2 games, it's a little more factors involved and then becomes more and more complicated. Therefore, we started to factor in more teams. And those teams, I believed, to have not as good a resume as Kansas State, but a better resume than Tulane. And we're talking about many teams. We're talking about a dozen teams, 15 teams. So my decision was at some point that for as much as I would like to adhere to the rule that, hey, if 2 teams have the same record and they played head-to-head, you award the team that game on the field, it was affecting all these other teams. Because if I was going to accurately evaluate Kansas State and their resume, and then I was automatically just going to put Tulane at least 1 spot ahead of them, but then you had all these other teams get affected because they had to be below Kansas State.
Sure.
And you see what I mean?
No, I for me, what I did, because I do the same type of, I do like the same type of rankings you do. I kind of put them both mid ground, if that makes sense. Like I have Tulane, I think, at like 19, and then I have Kansas State at 20. So maybe if Kansas State has a resume that's better than a couple of teams ahead of them, I kind of just like drop them down just for that loss, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
That's what I did. My other question was, so you have Tennessee at 1, which, yeah, they obviously have the best resume. And then I think you have Clemson at number 2. I didn't really understand that one. I think Georgia's wins against South Carolina and Oregon, to me, seem better than what Clemson's done.
Okay. So, first and foremost, thanks for giving me a pass on Tennessee, because I don't think it's such a slam dunk, number 1, but I'll take it since I don't have to defend it here. But they've got the best win in the country.
Sure.
I don't think anybody can debate that.
They also have a pretty good win against LSU.
Exactly. In a game that they dominated.
Yeah.
So I also take that into consideration, not just did they win or lose, but did they perform? What was the performance of the game? So I believe that the Tennessee win over Alabama is the best win in the country. But I believe that the Georgia win over Oregon is on a different scale the best win in the country, because it's against the best opponent in the most dominating fashion. So you can weigh those. But in terms of an opponent, the Alabama win's the best win. In terms of a complete domination of a good team, the Georgia win over Oregon. Where Clemson rates highly on my scale is that they beat Wake Forest, they beat North Carolina State, they beat Florida State. So there was a point in which they had, based on the AP poll, which of course I could care less, but it was noted there by a number of people that I saw, and it lined up with my rankings as well. Wake Forest had the 2 best wins in the country.
Okay.
And it could still be considered that they, not the 2 best wins collectively. And then just this past weekend, they beat Florida State, which I understand people are going to say Florida State's 4-3. Well, Florida State's 4-3 because they just lost to Clemson, and then they lost to 2 teams that Clemson just beat. I just again collectively looked at Clemson's wins and the dominance of the wins, and the Georgia Tech win being a 31-point win in week 1, which was a really non-significant, non-factor win, then became more of a factor in my eyes when Georgia Tech beat Duke and Pitt back-to-back.
I think I just look at it as more as like, what were you at your best, like your best overall thing? That's why I have Tennessee at number 1, Georgia at number 2, and then Michigan at number 3. Because I feel like what Michigan did to Penn State is kind of like the 3rd best thing if you like kind of rank them out.
Yeah, I understand what you're doing. Yours is less involved. Mine's a resume. Yours is a ceiling.
Sure.
Unless obviously the ceiling is high, but that they crashed and burned 3 other times, you're not going to rank them.
Yeah. Also, you have Ohio State at number 6, but I wouldn't say that their resume is necessarily great by any means.
No, it's not great. They haven't played a good schedule at all. The schedule, however, though, understand that even with the Penn State game on Michigan's resume, Michigan only has the 73rd ranked schedule in the country versus Ohio State's number 82. And believe me, Penn State's that game lifted Michigan's strength of schedule enormously.
I would say Maryland's a pretty decent win too.
Oh, I believe it's a good win too. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just saying that's what the strength of schedule people are telling us, that they're only 9 spots different.
Sure. I understand that.
Yeah, Michigan by far has the better win over Ohio State, and arguably the 2nd best win. And arguably the 3rd best win. The 3 best wins between Ohio State and Michigan may all go to Michigan. However, how well did Michigan beat Maryland and Iowa and some other games? And Ohio State has been dominant start to finish. You know, Notre Dame and Iowa, I'll put them in the same range. maybe even Notre Dame and Maryland, even though Maryland's got a better record.
For sure. So for me, I was born in 02, so I didn't really see Michigan's 2006 team. So from my perspective, the best team I've ever seen from Michigan is the 2016 team. I think they're better than the 2021 team. That's my personal opinion. But how would you compare this 2022 Michigan team to, all the ones that Jim Harbaugh has had? Would you say that this one's like better than both the 2021 team and the 2016 team?
Based on what I've seen, yes. I
Yeah.
think this is the best team.
Yeah. How would you compare the Ohio State team this year to the 2019 Ohio State team?
Ooh, well, that team proved it against Wisconsin twice, against Michigan State, who was decent. Of course, the Clemson playoff game, they lost, but they showed that they were as good just about as anyone. So I'm not ready to take this Ohio State team and compare them to the 2019 team. No.
So you would just, I would lean towards the 2019 team being better, but I guess we just don't know yet. I mean, that 2019 team had Chase Young, who was just like an absolute game wrecker.
Yeah. Jeffrey Okudah. Is there anybody in the secondary that can play anywhere close to him? No.
Sure. And my last question was, so I've heard a lot of people like this Tennessee team. People are like, oh, it kind of reminds me of like the Oklahoma with Kyler Murray, the like terrible defense, but can score. But like, I was thinking, could you compare this team to like the 2019 LSU team? I mean, I guess the LSU defense was much better, but do you see any way where like Tennessee could end up being like making a run like that, or no?
Well, the LSU defense didn't play that well the first 8 or 9 games of the season.
Sure.
They played better generally than Tennessee did against Alabama, but we can have an argument all night about is Alabama's defense really that good? Well, they gave up all these points to Tennessee, and the same thing on the Tennessee side. Tennessee's other defensive performances have been fairly strong. I know they gave up in the end. They gave up a lot of points to Florida, but there were some cheap points there at the end of the game. They held Pitt to 17 points, even with an overtime.
So like it's a realistic idea that they could actually win the national championship, because I've heard a lot of people say like you can't win it when your defense is this bad and blah 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 blah. But like, you think like their offense could probably like carry them through, or?
I have to get away from what I know about the roster and just deal with the performance on the field, because part of me just kind of holds back on Tennessee, thinking they haven't arrived yet. They haven't been able to recruit, and the recruiting was good under Jeremy Pruitt and Butch Jones, and it's never really been far down the line that they've recruited, but they haven't recruited at a national championship level. So it just, part of me tells me that they're just not ready, that they've not filled out a roster that has the depth and the high-end talent, especially on defense, to get it done. But the way they're playing, if we're just watching the way they're playing, they look as just about as good as anybody in the country.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. You have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right. I put together a video a few weeks ago and wanted to honor our Patreons. And I've never played that video, I guess because I'm a little gun shy, because the number of times I played a video, I can't get the audio to shut off on the video in favor of our discussion here to just play the video. But I very much want to recognize our folks on Patreon at the Voice of College Football community. Thanks for being part of our Patreon Voice of College Football family there. And so we've posted a few names, as many names as I could fit on the scroll down below. So thank you for being with us. And we hope you enjoy the predictions from me and Steve Merrill. Steve Merrill is 6-1 under the radar against the spread. And I am 25-12 against the spread the last 2 weekends. We'll forget the first part of the season where I was 500, but 25-12 the last 2 weekends against the spread. So we hope to continue that. And maybe I was a little too overconfident. I got to say, I looked at this week's games and I almost threw my picks on Patreon like on Wednesday early because I was looking at these games thinking, man, I'm going to nail these games because I'm pretty confident about that's going to happen. That's going to happen. That's going to happen. Yeah. Pride before a fall, right? The real MVP's on the line. Welcome in, sir.
How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Can you do me a favor and explain what on earth Georgia Tech's strategy was during that final drive?
What was their strategy? Their strategy was, we got 36 seconds left and no timeouts. We're going to throw the ball in the middle of the field where we're going to run out the clock. And then, of course, I understand backup quarterback, young quarterback, all that, but they do understand the game of football and they do understand the premise of a clock in sports, and they do understand and practice every day. So you saw the last play where he just ran out of bounds.
Yeah, unexplainable.
Throw the ball. Just throw it somewhere.
I thought they were going to do a hook and ladder type thing or maybe a long spike or something to get set up.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Georgia Tech had almost no shot of winning at that point anyway. It wasn't like their offense was lighting the world on fire, but still, if running out of bounds gives you 0% chance, anything's better than 0%.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why they're Georgia Tech, I guess.
They were a 3-3 football team.
They were, 2-1 in the conference. I was pulling for them to win the Coastal.
Yeah, I can't wait, Mark.
Shoot, they've only
got 2 Something you
months.
said at the beginning of the show irked me a bit.
Okay.
You said you were getting the winners' helmets up behind you, and you picked up a Tennessee, Ohio State, Ole Miss, but you don't have the defending national champions helmet behind you.
Yeah, I don't. You're right.
Yeah. Can we have the 3 SEC team playoff scenario?
Who's messing around with my graphics here? Somebody's popped on Pac-12. We're not doing the Pac-12 show here. What's going on with that? What's that? Anyway, we will tend to that in just a second. Yes, so you're irked that Georgia's not up there. Okay. They're on the third shelf. We're going to keep them down there with Stanford and Wisconsin. How about that? Nevada. Let's do this. This is what we're going to do. The only reason I did that was the last time I was on was the Miami show. So I just had the Miami helmet there. Well, Miami's horrible. So I was just thinking we're going to take Miami down and put some winners. I said some winners. I didn't say the winner, anything like that, just some winners. And so those were the first 3 good teams I could see. So we put them up there. But you know what? In honor of you, DeReal, this is what we're going to do. I'm feeling that we need to get Nevada up there and Navy and the mighty Golden Flashes of Kent State. And let's get somebody else up there too. Somebody else prominent. Connor's going to love this. I should stay with the theme and go with Air Force because there's the theme obviously right there, but we're going to break the theme. Could we stand these on? Because I really, our buddy Connor Johnson, he loves Oregon State so much and they just get no love from anybody. So it's a good looking set tonight. Oregon State's on top right there. How about that?
I mean, listen, Oregon State, in my opinion, is a legitimate top 25 football team.
Oregon State is?
Yeah, Oregon State.
Okay. I'm going to be scratching my head while we continue the conversation. Let me see what we got here with Oregon State. Okay. Keep going. What you got?
Well, Mark, some people are perplexed or perturbed, I guess, because the SEC dominance has continued once again. Alabama in your power rankings, they are the fourth best team in the SEC, and they're around the fourth best team overall. Now I know that's not directly how it works, but
Yeah, sure.
you
Well,
understand.
I am going to admit that my power rankings, I haven't really even come up with a formula for my power rankings. It's simply just kind of, it's kind of my opinion, and it's kind of the resume. I'm not going to totally go against the resume, but it's not, it's a little bit of both. So I haven't clearly defined the power rankings, but yes, you're right. I put Bama at 4 because
Yeah,
of
so
the
that
Texas
would be
performance wasn't the best, and Texas A&M, and then they lost.
that's actually about where I have them. But the general point I'm making is when the college football playoff expands to 12 teams, and
Yeah.
Alabama might be the fourth or third best team in the SEC. I hope people understand what I believe is going to happen. You're going to get the representation everybody wants at the beginning with
Yeah.
the Pac-12, the Big 12, and Clemson, or maybe Florida State, maybe NC State. But the further you go in the playoffs, it'll be more SEC heavy.
If they perform to the standard that they've reached over the last 8 seasons in the playoffs, and even before that, you are correct. The SEC, I believe, is 14-5 in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, something crazy like that. And the insane thing to me is people I just don't understand how people think they can even these conferences can be somewhat competitive against the SEC. Like it's speculation or it's some bias or something like that. If the SEC was in the playoffs and they were 5-12, I would understand the bias argument more than what their record is currently. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I get it. 13-3.
Oh, 13-3.
13
Did
and
you?
3. Just added that. I took out the games against each other.
Yeah, because the SEC clearly there's so much bias and so much mantling in the system that the SEC has to play the SEC in the title game. It can't be just they have the best talent with the best coaches, with the best players, with the best recruiting grounds, with the fans who probably care more than any other group of fans in the country. Can't be any of those reasons. It's got to be because the TV networks, the referees, all just happen to like the SEC, regardless of which conferences they ref, where they're from, or anything like that.
Well, I will say this. Everything that you just said, I can completely agree with. Yes. The SEC is the best conference. It's been the best conference for at least 15 years. Argument before that even, but certainly it's been the best. We can't even discuss it. Unfortunately, my channel would be so enhanced by having a great debate all season, every season, off season, best conference, and you could come on here and that would be a great argument. We can't have an argument. There is no argument. If anybody wants to have an argument, I'm not going to name the person that appears with me on a consistent basis that wanted to have that argument this past off season and kind of brought it up and actually told me, Mark, you kind of talked me under the desk on that one. You just kind of blew my argument out of the water within 3 minutes. So I'm like,
well, the thing is, Mark,
the wrong conference.
The thing that confuses me is everybody wants an expanded playoff, which I can understand. If you were a Big 12 fan, you would like to see someone in there sometime do something. But the way they're expanding it is making it to where the SEC is going to have such a lopsided advantage. It's going to widen the gap further, in my opinion, because the 5 seed will either be Alabama or Georgia, most likely. They are going to play the 50th best team in the country, something like that in Cincinnati.
Oh, not recently, but I get your point. 30th, whatever they are, it doesn't matter.
It might be worse than that because Cincinnati, UCF, Houston are all leaving. What's Memphis ranked right now?
Well, you make a good point about the 4 leaving going to the Big 12. With those 4 leaving, who is the best Group of 5 program?
What is South Alabama?
Boise State's dropped off. Fresno State's dropping off. San Diego State, maybe the last 2. San Diego State, Fresno State, my last 2 examples, maybe just having a bad season. But Boise State's been in a slide for 5-10 years. Not bad slide, but they're not the we go undefeated all the time kind of program anymore. Yeah, we're going to, have some App State, Tulane, Boise State entries into the playoff, it appears. Memphis, like you say. Ouch.
Yeah, I don't know if that game is what I'm expecting it to be, which is 35-0 at the half, 42-0 at the half. And that's not unreasonable.
No.
I don't understand if that's the consistent score year over year over year over year. Eventually, the word playoffs start losing its meaning and be like, oh, the average margin of victory is 40.8 points per game at 5 versus 12 matchup. Yeah, and I don't see how people just tune out because of how lopsided it is.
Well, what's your remedy? What's your playoff system? Or are you just saying that basically this is the way it is and we can't do anything about it?
The +1 is my remedy to
Oh, that's right. You like the +1.
I also think for the 5-4 matchup, I don't know how often the 4 seed's going to win. Because the 4 seed is going to be the 4th best Power 5 champion, which would currently be TCU. TCU versus either Tennessee, Georgia, or Alabama right now on a neutral field would be what? A 21-point game?
Yeah.
17-point game, something like that?
Yes.
And I don't see anywhere in the past where that'd be close. So that's basically one SEC spot locked up. The 1 seed is probably the 2nd SEC spot locked up for sure. So, at a minimum, in my opinion, you're going to have 2 SEC teams every year in the playoff, the Final 4. Whereas usually it's only 1 in the current system we have. So you're actually getting more SEC teams in and not less, which is the exact opposite of which the people expanding the playoff are advocating for.
SEC haters have about 3 hopes, and they probably don't like these options because they probably hate these programs just as much as they hate the SEC. But Ohio State, Clemson, and if USC is able to build into the program it used to be, are about the only 3 programs. And I guess I should be putting Michigan in there, but I would like to see Michigan actually put together. I'm not saying that Michigan's not as good as Ohio State this season, but Ohio State has proven that they can play elite level football. Michigan hasn't proven that since Charles Woodson was on the field. So I want to see it one season. Like if Michigan can complete this season, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, and then play a playoff game that's either a win or like a narrow loss, like we deserve to be there, 31-28. We were just as good as the other team. It just broke that way. They have to have that kind of season. Until then, Michigan's not an elite program. So it's Ohio State, Clemson, and maybe USC against the SEC.
Right. And if the goal is, when I'm worried, well, I guess not worried, I'm an SEC homer is what everybody tells me. But if you have Oklahoma, let's say once they join the SEC, they lose all by 3 points to Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and they go 9-3, maybe even 8-4. I would pick that 8-4 team over a 10-2 Big 12 team, Pac-12 team after USC and UCLA leaves. And then what happens if that 8-4 team goes out and beats the 4 seed or beats the 6 seed? Well, people are going to think, my goodness, you got an 8-4 team beating a 10-2 or 11-1 team. What is the perception going to be then?
Well, the perception is going to be just magnified. It's basically going to be what it is right now, and I think this is where you're headed. it's going to be what it is right now, but just magnified to other levels of the SEC that are going to be making the playoff. Because right now, the SEC gets the benefit of the doubt, which in a sense irritates me because it's based on previous seasons. It's not based typically on what's going on now, because there's not enough non-conference games for the SEC to validate that it's the best necessarily in the non-conference. Like if we look at the non-conference results from this season, and this was a good year for the SEC is not clearly the best, but I have no doubt that it's the best. It's been the best, and therefore, obviously, previous seasons influence the committee, but I can't argue with that because they continue to validate those selections.
Right. And where also I'm going with this is that the regular season is going to have very little meaning. Mark, the SEC championship game last year had who cares about that game? Who cares? Because Alabama and Georgia played in the national championship and Georgia won it. No person saying, you know what, Alabama's truly the better team because they won the first game. Nobody says that. I haven't heard it. So what's going to happen?
From a few Alabama fans, I've heard it. Because they say Jamison Williams missed the national championship game or was knocked out in the second quarter. We had him for the SEC title game, and we won the game.
You know what? That's fair. But still,
and we won it by more than Georgia beat us.
I think the heavy majority of people think Georgia is better than Alabama. Yes. So where this is going to hurt is in rivalry week, in my opinion. If you're Ohio State, Michigan, it's very possible you play 3 times in the same season. If they get rid of divisions, you could play in the game, and then you play next week in the Big Ten title game, and then you could be put in the same side or even in the same bracket in the playoff.
Too much of a good thing.
Right, exactly. And then what's going to happen? If you're a Michigan player or an Ohio State player and you're guaranteed to play the next week, how much does the game matter? From a practical standpoint, 0. Because you're both guaranteed in the playoffs, all but essentially, unless a billion and one things happen, which haven't happened as far as my recollection of 2 11-1 teams not being top 12 at the end of the season. So if Michigan lost both games by like 45 points, I still think they get in the playoff. Okay,
so this is what these conferences are working on right now, or that what they should be working on. And if this was 2 years ago, I'd have little faith that Kevin Warren was looking that far ahead and figuring this out. But he's proven to be a better commissioner than I think we thought initially. Made some boneheaded decisions. He got ahead of himself, made some statements that he had to retract and all that. But over the last year and a half, he's done pretty well for himself in negotiating a new contract for the Big Ten that's worth $1 zillion, and of course USC and UCLA, and he's talking about more teams, so I'm sure he's got something brewing there. So they need to be playing out all these scenarios. They need to be going through all past seasons saying what would have happened all these seasons if we make our conference this 4-team pods or these 7-team divisions, 8-team divisions. They need to be going through all that and repeating it over and over and over to say, what issues are we going to run into? And one is exactly what you're sizing up. Ohio State and Michigan play 2 consecutive weeks.
Right. And I don't see how you avoid it unless you move the game, which I doubt's going to happen. Or Ohio State or Michigan get worse, or a team gets so good that they eclipse one of them too, which is unlikely.
You can't bank on your teams getting better or worse. You just have to. So there was a caller who made a suggestion a few weeks ago that if you put, I forget exactly how it went, but he made up 2-team pods. So this is what he did. If I can remember this correctly. So he said, divide, let's say, the Big Ten into, there's going to be 16 teams, make their 8 2-team pods. And the only thing that determines is that's the last game of the season, and you cannot go to the conference championship game if you lost against your rival the last game of the season. So meaning you have no divisions, you take the two best teams in the conference championship game unless one of them lost the last game of the season. So you're basically eliminating Ohio State or Michigan, and you're taking the third place team if they are the two top teams.
So what basically that's going to do, from my understanding, is it's going to make the winner of the Michigan-Ohio State game still the presumptive favorite for the Big Ten national title game. Because there isn't a team outside of Ohio State or Michigan that I think has been near their level in quite a while. I mean, Penn State a few years ago beat Ohio State on a blocked field goal or something like that was returned for a touchdown, some fluky game. But there isn't, if you go over 20, 30 years, it isn't consistently that Ohio State, Michigan, and then there's a third team. It's just Ohio State and Michigan. So the problem in that scenario for me is the Big Ten title game is going to be irrelevant.
You're being pretty kind to Michigan.
Well, I know. I'm listen, Michigan won last year, so I got to give them a little credit.
Sure.
But
yes, it's been a one-team league for 20-some years.
Right. And you can slice it up any way you want to, but it's still going to be a one-team league. Right? You can't get it.
USC's coming.
Yeah, USC's coming. I mean, I guess if their hype is lived up to where they are, so far it's on course. But we can't just assume that their hype is going to live up to where it ends up.
No, they've had down periods as well.
Right. So they haven't been consistently great.
And I wish I had the guy that had the two-team pod, because he had a really good idea and he presented it, but then I thought through it and I poked a big hole in it. There was something drastically wrong with it, so he had to go back to the drawing board. Don't remember what that was. Well, I don't know what to tell you. You can try to legislate all you want to try to make it fair and bring as many teams into it. But if one league's better than the rest of the leagues, then the teams are just going to win in whatever configuration you make it. And they're going to meet each other in semifinal games and championship games.
Right. And then my problem is once we go to the 12th team, I'm at the point where, you know what? I don't like the 12-team playoff. I'm fine with the 4 or the +1. But I'm like, screw it. I want Tennessee to place whoever's the 4 seed, win by 28, 35 points, have the third best SEC team beat the Pac-12 or Big 12 champion just to prove a point. Do that 6 or 7 years straight, and then everybody can realize maybe this wasn't the greatest thing on earth we thought of. But once we get to that point, I feel like because of the money that's going to be generated from the team, the TV markets, the companies out there like Fox, ESPN, all them big players, they'll never go back.
Well, yes, it makes money, so it's not going to go back. But here's my final statement, and we'll keep moving on. But it makes sense to expand the playoff for one simple reason. We need representation from all the conferences. We don't have it. And regardless of what we know about the SEC and what we know on the other end of the spectrum about how bad the Pac-12 has been for much of this playoff era, the Pac-12 does not get an opportunity to play for a national championship. Their conference champion does not get a chance to play for the national championship. So we need to give them an opportunity. Not because we're giving away, not because we're in a charitable mood, but because if you win a conference in major college football, then you should be playing for a national championship.
Well, and that's your opinion. But my opinion is I want to see the entertaining product. I want to see great teams play. And if your conference doesn't have any great teams, then sorry. But
how do we know that? We don't play enough games. If this was Major League Baseball, we could say
that's how we know it. 49-3.
Because of one football game.
Yeah, one football game. Is that what they play in the playoffs? One football game? Is it a best of 7, a best of 3, best of 5?
The teams need to be evaluated over the course of multiple games. We can't just say Georgia and Oregon played and it wasn't a contest. Therefore, the Pac-12 is eliminated from consideration.
No, not the Pac-12. Just Oregon. Just Oregon. And
so Oregon could win the rest of its games, be clearly the best team in the Pac-12, and you think that that game should just eliminate them?
It should greatly, drastically reduce their chances of making the playoff. I don't think they should get in over a one-loss Tennessee. I don't think they should get in over a one-loss Bama, a one-loss Georgia, a one-loss Ohio State, a one-loss Michigan.
I believe that it's reasonable and logical to say this, regardless of what we think about the best league and how many of those teams are the best and all of that, is that we play in these separate quadrants, the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and we have very little crossover to compare them. And usually that crossover is not seeded correctly because the games are scheduled 10 years in advance. So Ohio State doesn't play Alabama. They don't play Clemson. They play, can't even remember who they played this year. Well, Notre Dame, a non-conference team, but so we have non-conference results in just little doses, and they're rarely like seeded teams. They're usually not seeded correctly against each other to make a fair evaluation. So I don't have enough evidence. If I'm going to be logical and reasonable and fair, I can make a judgment and say the SEC is the best. We know they're the best. They recruit the best players. They go on to the NFL with the most players. So they should be given the most slots. But there aren't enough results on the field to back that up that can put me in a position where I can feel good and feel that it's just and fair to eliminate leagues from participating in a playoff.
I'm not saying eliminate a league. I'm just saying eliminate a team. I'm not going to say a league. I just said a team. And then you can determine based on that team, okay, this team isn't good enough to compete. So if they beat another good team, so like if they beat UCLA this week, Oregon beats UCLA. Well, UCLA, you know what you can do? You can eliminate them and just kind of work from there.
We're going to a playoff system where regardless of whether you lose a game 800-0, if you win your conference, you're going to the playoff.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I'm talking about what I think it should be.
What you would do. You would really say if Oregon was the best team, most dominant team in the Pac-12 and was 12-1 because on September 3rd, with a first-year head coach who's never been a head coach of a program in his life, lost in Atlanta to Georgia 49-3, that there's just no way they can recover from that. They are not going to the playoffs.
No, I didn't say they were no way recovering. If I did, I didn't mean it that way.
Okay.
My point was they should be severely behind the 8 ball in getting it.
It sounds like you're for just continuing to judge and evaluate all these teams and not give any automatic spots to anyone.
Right. I want to see great games. And the great games come from the great teams.
Who's going to make these evaluations and judgments? A committee?
We can have a formula. We can use your formula if you want to. We can use any sort of formula, compute. I don't care. I just want to see the best teams play. I don't care. You can call it whatever you want to, Mark. That's something else I don't understand. You can call it the invitational, a playoff. You can call it a get-together, a collection of teams. That don't matter to me.
Invitational.
I don't care what it's called. I want to see the best teams play in the playoffs, and we haven't gotten that.
Playing in the playoffs. They're going to be playing in the playoffs.
Oh, well, yeah, because of 12 teams, it's hard to mess that up.
Exactly. The committee will stop having control and authority over the importance of their authority goes from being selecting just the teams that make it to selecting the 4 champions and determining who gets buys. That's going to be where their authority comes into play because any moron can select the 11 best teams in the country within 1 or 2. We can all squabble about, but within 1 or 2, usually just 1, and then get the one group of 5 that's going to get killed.
Right. And all my point of it is I believe the SEC is so dominant, and maybe the Big Ten when they add USC will be so dominant that these other leagues will be separated. Kind of the same way we view the group of 5 and the Power 5 is separated. Now, it's not going to be to that extent, but it's going to be the Pac-12, Big 12, ACC, minus Clemson, and then the Big Ten and SEC. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, we got folks waiting. I'm going to get to other calls, but I'm going to ask you to do this. If you care to do it, in your spare time or while you're on the chat here at some point, whenever, go through the 8 playoff years and, in your opinion, evaluate how good those teams were. Were those the 4 best teams in the country, or were they 1, 2, 3, and like 10 or whatever, to where we are not having the best teams play in the playoff?
I'll tell you, last year Cincinnati wasn't the 4th best team in my opinion.
Okay, so somebody else should have been there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. The 4th best team in the country was either Ole Miss or Ohio State or somebody. Yeah.
Who won the Big 12? Baylor?
Yes.
They should probably be thrown in there as well.
Okay.
So it's fine. It's just a different perspective of looking at it, and there's nothing wrong. And I hope you're right. I hope my worries of the college football playoff expansion is completely wrong, and I can say I was completely wrong. But
did I ever say that? I didn't tell you that it's not going to turn out like that.
Well, I'm saying it. I'm saying it. Yeah. I didn't say you said it. I'm just saying it.
Yeah, I didn't say it because the SEC's winning the playoff games. So I'm not going to say that until I see otherwise.
Right. I just hope it doesn't damage the sport. That's all I care about. And make it to where the playoff games are viewed as, well, we can't wait till we got to wait till the semifinals or something like that to get competitive games. So.
All right, man. We'll see you.
Yeah. No problem. Congrats to Virginia winning tonight, and good luck to everybody's team the rest of the year.
All right. We got a congratulations to the Wahoos tonight. Jeffrey's on the line. What's going on, Jeffrey?
I'm doing good. Man, I wasn't even going to talk about what you guys were just talking about and just brush it off. But, dude, I'm like, what is he talking about? You've got the playoff. I don't like the 12-team playoff. We've been through this before.
Yep.
But you're going to have the best teams because you talk about Cincinnati making the playoff because they went undefeated and there should have been teams in there. Well, now you're going to have the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. You're going to have the best teams that missed it just short. So I don't know what he's talking about saying that the best teams aren't. I don't understand. What is he trying to get at? The real. I like the real, but what's he getting at?
I think what he's basically saying is that the SEC is overwhelmingly the best conference with the best teams.
I agree.
And so this committee is going to have a decision to make. Do we honor what we believe about the SEC and elevate the 4th or 5th best teams in the SEC into a playoff above the 2nd place team in the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and those teams, even though the records don't corroborate that, because the SEC has earned that or deserves that, or they're just clearly better than everybody else. And he just thinks that people think that by making this more inclusive, that it's going to make it it's going to even the playing field, and we're going to see more diversity of teams in there. And he just thinks it's going to still just funnel down into SEC's teams cram even more so than it does now. It's going to seem even more crazy because you could have a 12-team playoff. You could have 4 SEC teams, and they could all win and just meet in the semifinals.
Well, I agree with you there, and he's talking about the playoff ruining the sport and all that. I mean, it already has. I mean, the fact that you had the playoff to begin with is when opt-outs started. You never had opt-outs until the playoff because, again, as I've said before, ESPN has hyped up the playoff so much, even from before a game is played, they're promoting it in August. That's what's ruined the playoff. I mean, not the playoff, but the sport. It has nothing to do with the fact of expanding the playoff. It was the fact the playoff was instituted in the first place.
So how would you determine the national champion, and what would you do?
I don't know because, I mean, obviously I'm not smart enough probably to make those decisions. But, I mean, all I know is the way it used to be. Usually you had 2 teams that were undefeated most years, not always, but in most years. And those are the 2 teams that made the championship.
Oh, you like the BCS championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jeffrey, we've obviously never hit this topic before, have we? Do you want me to go through every year of the BCS and tell you why it didn't work?
I mean, I guess really, really quick, because there's probably people that want to go, and I got a couple other things to
I'll
say.
give you one example. The very first year of the BCS, 1998. Okay. Tennessee was undefeated. Okay. They were the only undefeated team, major team in the country. Tulane was undefeated, but nobody considered them. Tennessee undefeated. Okay. Ohio State, Florida State, Wisconsin, Arizona, UCLA, Kansas State all had one loss. What do you do?
I agree. I mean, that makes sense.
We're 11-1.
I agree, but the difference about what I'm saying is it's not about determining the best team. I'm talking about how when you had the BCS, the bowl games were still important. The bowl games still matter. Players were happy to make the Rose Bowl, and now you're having opt-outs in the Rose Bowl because Ohio State missed the playoff. That's all I'm talking about. The bowl games have been ruined, and I understand the playoff is going to include these bowl games, so it's like the playoffs are the bowl games. But still, to me, that's all I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah, and what you're saying makes total sense, and it hurts me as well as a college football junkie and lifelong nerd, historian, whatever you want to throw in the blank. I don't like it either because I don't like, hey, I'm here every night during bowl season, and there could have been just the best bowl game in the world just played, or there could have been a day of 5 bowl games, and you know what happens? Maybe one person will bring up, hey, did you see that play at the end of the Tennessee-Purdue game? That was a great bowl game. But everybody else is, all right, well, next Friday, the playoff. What do you think? Everybody's asking me about the playoffs. So everything that you said is very valid about the health of the sport. But how are you going to determine a champion?
Well, I agree. I mean, the playoff in itself is again, it's done because of money. That's the most important thing. I understand that, and that's fine because obviously we're living in 2022. I get that, but the problem that I have is because you have all these teams and you're talking about representation. And again, I understand that you're getting all these teams, but that more teams for more conferences because you're including all the conference championship games. But it's like you said, it's possible you can have a 4-team SEC playoff. That's not going to make anybody happy, so people are still going to be complaining about it. The playoff was supposed to fix the problems. It's not going to make everybody happy. People are still going to be complaining about it. So, to me, leaving it the way it used to be should have been better, but obviously it's not going to go back there because money. But, again, the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Well, it wasn't a good system before either, Jeffrey, because there were teams that had just as valid a right to play in the BCS championship game and got left out. So it was excluding teams from the championship game that had just as good a claim as teams that were selected. That's why most people wanted a playoff. That's how we typically do things in America as in sports, is we want teams to play in a playoff format so it determines who the best team is.
I understand. It's just an interesting conversation in general. I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't think anybody would be having any discussion on it at all if the SEC wasn't so dominant. If the SEC was not so dominant and all the conferences were pretty even and all, like if you had a 12-team playoff and all these conferences were even, Pac-12, you could say 2 or 3 teams are at the top and they're really good in the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 and the Big 10. And no one would say anything, but it's because the SEC is so dominant is why there's complaint. Because SEC fans are obviously happy because the SEC is going to dominate. And then people that are against the SEC are upset because, it's not solving all the problems. So it's just still creating discontent all over the place.
So, yeah, and also understand, when I was your age, do you know how we found out who the national champion was? I'm dating myself really badly here. This is how we found out who the national champion was. We watched New Year's Day, the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Orange Bowl, all of them, Fiesta Bowl. They were all on New Year's Day. It was a glorious day of football. It was phenomenal. I would go to bed on New Year's night, and I would have a guess as to who the national champion was. I'd be like, well, Auburn won the Sugar Bowl in Oklahoma won the Orange Bowl. Well, they probably are going to vote on. But I'd have to get up the next morning, get the newspaper, and open it up, and the same knuckleheads in the AP that I rail on every week, and this is the reason I do my own top 25. They told us who won the national championship. The same AP voters that don't know anything about college football outside of the team they cover, they are the ones that voted and told us who the national champion was.
That's not very legitimate.
No, it's not legitimate at all.
It's kind of interesting, though. I actually didn't know that, actually. And I know a lot
You
about
didn't know that.
stuff, but
Yes.
I didn't know that.
We didn't know who won the national championship when we went to bed.
Wow.
We had to get the newspaper the next morning.
Well, I had that experience when I was little. I never got to know the national championship well when I was little because I had to go to bed before the game ended. That's the only way on that. But wow, that's insane. I didn't know that. That's crazy. You learn something new every day.
You get an idea. You know, you would think, well, they must have won the national title because they were, you know, obviously if somebody was number one before and they won, then okay, then that's a slam dunk. But shoot, Miami elevated from number 5 on New Year's Day to number 1. They passed 4 teams. They were the national champ.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's crazy. On a different note, I think I was really cool that you and everybody was on the Will's show earlier.
Yeah.
With me on it. How did you know about the show? Did he like email you or whatever?
Maybe somebody who tipped me off doesn't want to be revealed. I don't know, but somebody tipped me off that you guys were holding a show there, and so I decided to stop by.
Well, thank you. It was really cool, actually, because I was, in like the private chat thing after the show or whatever, and he was like, Will emailed me. He was like, "You want to do a show?" And I was like, "Sure." I mean, I don't mind. I think it's really cool. I mean, I guess it's because we're like the 2 of the younger people on here. I guess it kind of works out, I guess, but it was really cool. I mean, it's kind of different when you're on here like as a guest and you're talking for a few minutes, but when you're doing it for like an hour, it's just me and him. It was really cool. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun, but yeah, I mean, he was basically just going through all the games, and I didn't have no notes. The phone, everything was off. I didn't have no. I was just like picking, man. I was just like, who do you think's going to win? Well, this. And I was like, well, I think it was just crazy. I had a lot of fun though. I'm just glad you guys all came over. It was really fun, but yeah, he's wanting me to do. He's wanting me this next week to do the same thing on my channel. On Thursday at 9. So it's going to be kind of like an alternate thing where he does it one week, I do it one week. So I guess we can say, hey, everybody go over and check the show out on my channel at 9 o'clock. But to go on to you, I watched your top 25 that actually makes sense again. I watched it the first time, but I watched it again to give it a view. I hate that you lost all those views. It still just irritates me because it's ridiculous. Just on that note, who do you think did it? Do you know who did it?
We can't get into that, Jeffrey. I am about 98% sure of who did it, and I have asked YouTube. So I got on support with YouTube, and I said, "This is what's happened to me," and they verified it. And I said, and we had to verify videos, and you can imagine their database is probably ridiculous. But they found all the videos and they said, we'll reinstate these videos. We just want to verify that you're yours, that they are yours. And they had to send me a form. I had to fill it out and so forth and so on. And I asked them, I said, I would like to verify who deleted these videos. And I even gave them an email address, but they wouldn't do that. So I just wanted to verify who it was because I don't want to call anybody out because I'm 98% sure I am not the type person that is going to go out without complete verification. So even though it is a smoking gun of sorts, but yeah, it's somebody who just, I believe, again, based on I'm 98% sure, just is a bit childish. I knew was childish and had maybe some emotional and mental issues of sorts, but I thought they were harmless, but they were obviously malicious. So anyway, yeah, it killed some really good videos. And the thing is that I tried to explain to YouTube because YouTube says, we'll reinstate them, which is great, but who knows, that could be like weeks from now. Well, nobody's watching a Michigan, Penn State analysis after the game, 3 weeks later. So I said, well, that's great, but I don't do a baking or gardening channel where, these videos are just as good 10 years from now. No, it's like they're lost, they're gone. Nobody's watching these videos. They got a very short shelf life. So, I just got robbed of 100,000 views and all that. So that's fine. We will.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate about college football content. Is like you said, the shelf life is short.
Yes.
That stinks. But how did they delete your video? How did they do that? I mean, if you can't tell me that, don't worry about it. But how they do?
Yeah,
that?
let's not go into it anymore. That's good.
I
appreciate your interest.
I'm sorry. The only reason why is because I'm not a tech guy. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to do that. Like, I wouldn't want to do that, but it's like, how do people do stuff like that? It's like, how do you hack something? I mean, I don't know. I don't understand anything. And like, to me, there should be it should be way too hard to do that or whatever. It shouldn't be able to happen.
Well, understand with what I'm doing and the way I've built this, there are permissions given to people.
Okay.
So it wasn't when I say hacked, I was just using that term because it was the easiest way to convey it. Wasn't really hacked.
Yeah, you're good. Like I said, I don't want to call nobody. I don't want like nothing like that. I was just wondering because like, I mean, my thing is with like everybody assumes that I understand technology. I don't get it at all, man. It's like I'm trying to figure out how to do the StreamYard for the show next week, and I'm like, Will, how do you do it? So me and him are like trying to set it up or whatever, which I gotta wait 24 hours for it to let me do my first one or whatever, which I didn't know that. So it's like I don't even know. I just thought I was curious, but again, I'm sorry that happened to you. But like I said, I didn't want to like get anything like that. I didn't want any discussion that is illegal.
I appreciate you asking.
I was just wondering. Because I mean, my thing is you work hard, and like there's a lot of people that I'm not gonna say deserve to be get something like that happen to them, but there's a lot of people out there that do a lot of bad things or they're not good people, and then that everything goes great for them. It's like you're a great guy and you're doing great content. There's like no reason like that something like that should happen. It's just, to me, it's pathetic because, like, again, as I say every time I'm on it, you do a great job, and everybody should be subscribed to the Voice of College Football because it's great stuff. And it's like when I saw that the community post and when I heard it in the live stream, I was just mad because it's like to me it's like there's no business in doing it to a guy like you. It should never happen, but that's the world we live in. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, you would think if you if a person who is of integrity and ethics and professional has an issue with someone, that they would just deal with it face to face and not do something malicious. Like, it's basically destroying property. It's destroying somebody's property is basically what you're doing, destroying something in their work environment. So yeah, that's it is not a good thing. Jeffrey, you should have been along for the ride. It would have been right around now, 2 years ago in October of 2020. That's when I was having my battle with ESPN that a lot of people that are probably listening right now remember. So I was in a much more difficult and much more lengthy battle and situation. And that's when I left ESPN. But yeah. So, but I appreciate you being here. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you. Last question because obviously there's tons of people waiting, and every caller's taking too long, and I always take too long. But the Virginia Georgia Tech game, I didn't watch any of it because obviously I was doing the show with Will. But Georgia Tech 9 points. Like, I picked Georgia Tech to win. I'm like, they're 3-3. They're playing better now. Jeff Collins gone, and then they lay an egg. I was like, man, that stinks.
To their defense, they lost their quarterback, Jeff Sims, in the, I want to say, second quarter.
He got hurt.
Don't know exactly what happened to him. It might have been a concussion protocol kind of situation. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I had the game on. I wasn't completely locked in on it. I actually had a few shows and records myself and a few meetings. So I actually DVR'd it and tried to catch up and watch most of it, which I did. But yeah, it was an ugly game for sure. Both wide receiver cores dropped a million passes. Like, they couldn't catch anything, either one of them.
Yeah, that's shocking with Virginia, obviously, because last year what Virginia was. Yeah, Will made an interesting point. And last thing on the Virginia thing, and I'll get out of here. But you were on, I think, what he's talking about. But it's like Virginia. You had Tony Elliott. You know, he was offensive coordinator at Clemson last year, and Clemson's he made a great point, and he's not blaming him. But it's interesting how Clemson's offense last year was not great. And now their offense is better now that he's gone. And now that he's at Virginia head coach, their offense has gone from good to bad. I'm not saying it's him, but that's just very interesting.
It is. It's a pretty easy deduction to make. And Brendan Armstrong is not having anywhere close to the year that he had. So we've got an issue, obviously, with the internet here. So my apologies to everybody here. Are we back? So that's me. That's not you, Jeffrey. I believe that's our issue here. We had this the other night. We never have issues with the internet around here, but we are tonight and did the other night. But anyway, on the favorable side for Tony Elliott, to be fair, he was calling plays and coordinating the offense at Clemson going back to 2015 through a lot of good Clemson offenses.
That's a great point. It's just very interesting. But yeah, you're good. I thought it was me. That's why I blanked my camera. I thought I was glitching out because I'm always doing it. But you're good, man. That was funny. Yeah, I can't wait for the games. I probably won't call in tomorrow because I gotta go to bed early. We're taking like a day trip on Saturday or something like that. So. Yeah, but I just wanted to go on tonight. I'm super tired because like last night we stayed up to like 3 a.m. talking, and after the USC show, and I didn't even know that you had like a show after the show. It's like it was almost better than the show. It was unbelievable.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Our guy Jeffrey stopping by to talk some college football. Would actually love to take that conversation a little further because he has a great point about the destruction of college football. I completely agree with that end of it, but we need to come up with a viable way to determine a champion. Not that our discussion is going to change anything that's been decided, because once again, it's a 12-team playoff that's going to make a boatload of money for the networks, and that's the bottom line. David Greenshields here. Hello, sir.
To the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. By the way, you mentioned that pods thing earlier. If the Big Ten does go to 16 teams, I think it would be 4-team pods.
Well, yeah, I was mentioning what somebody suggested here.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually divided, I posted a video where I divided the league into pods as well. I did the divisions. I did the pods.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was not that I did anything revolutionary. I thought it was fairly cut and dry to do it in a very logical way. But this viewer suggested to get around the potential of Ohio State, Michigan playing back-to-back weeks and then potentially with a 12-team playoff 3 times in one season, that you eliminate one of them by having them play in 2-team pods. And those 2-team pods are the rivalry matchups. And then when you're done with the season, you select the 2 best teams, regardless of the divisions and pods, for the conference championship game, with the only caveat that each of those teams have to win the final game of the season. So you either have the 2 top teams or you drop a spot, and that avoids the repeat.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I guess you could still do 16 teams, 2 divisions of 8, and still keep it split up. But, the pods thing is an interesting way to go. But I guess we're going to find out in a couple years. So
yeah, we should find out. I would think if we're going into 2024, we should find out maybe in a year and a half. I would think that'd be something that they're going to announce sometime in the off season leading into 24.
Right. Yeah, and I'm a traditionalist. Yeah, and I'm a traditionalist. I'd like to see, the game not being diminished at the end of the year, like you guys were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. All right, I want to get to the football on the field here, Mark. By the way, I saw your podcast with Mr. Dace earlier this week. Giving the team up north all their plaudits, which I found to be interesting. I wanted to comment on it, and well deserved.
How can you not after that game?
Well, first of all, I want to say I won money on them, so I can't be too upset with them. I called them to win that game by 10 to 11 points. I said 27-17, 28-17, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I had them winning by 2 scores. I would also add, though, I got a chance to listen to some of the post-mortem by the Penn State people after the game. And I know you don't have a Penn State show anymore. I know that they do like a wrap-up after the game.
Yep.
What I found to be interesting is, and I, this is one thing, and one of the reasons I picked them to only score 17 points is 2 reasons. Number one, Penn State offensive line play has been atrocious for a long time. Even when they had good teams under Rick Sorley and Barkley, the best of the Franklin teams in 16 and 17, they didn't have good offensive line play that year. And then the second reason is obviously who's under center, Sean Clifford. To me, he's a low-end Big Ten quarterback and maybe a MAC quarterback at best. And I might be being a little bit harsh, but you should listen to the Penn State fans after that game. They're ready for Drew Aller. First of all, I want you to chew over that a little bit. And secondly, I would make this point. Do you remember Penn State got off to a hot start last year and went into free fall towards the end of the season? Comment a little bit on that, and what are the chances about Penn State going into free fall after that loss?
So Penn State went to Iowa City as the 2nd or 3rd ranked team in the country. It was a 2 versus 3 matchup. Sean Clifford was injured in that game and left the game. Penn State had a lead when he left that I believe was 14-3. And so Mark went up for Sean Clifford. He left with a lead. They blew the lead without him. They lose the game. Or possibly, if he stays in the game, they beat Iowa. They're continuing a pretty strong season at 6-0. But they lost that game. Yes, did the free fall from there. Of course, lost to Ohio State. Lost that zillion overtime game to Illinois.
Right.
So once Sean Clifford came back, which I can't recollect. If I saw the schedule with the scores, it would come back to me. I don't remember. He didn't miss much time. He may have missed a game. I know they held him out late in the season against Rutgers, their second to last game of the season. I think that just because they thought they could get by without him, and they did. It wasn't pretty, but he was compromised the rest of the year. He was hurt. He was banged up the rest of the year. Plus, they had one of the 5 worst rushing teams in the country, so he had to run the football. So the offense was on his back. I think in addition to that, they had the semblance of a great defense to start. From an athletic standpoint, from the standpoint that they would eventually have 6 NFL players, 6 players drafted off that defense, that they had a tremendous defense. But they did get banged up, and I think they just, for much of the season, didn't play up to their potential. But they played well. They were decent. And so, yeah, we could be in free fall here. They can, they're going to lose to Ohio State most likely, unless they just have a remarkable recovery and show us something that we don't expect. Maryland and Penn State right now, you've got to consider them fairly even.
Maryland's got no quarterback right now, Mark.
Well, they don't have a quarterback.
That could be a problem.
The Edwards kid, the backup to Talia, did not complete a pass in the game against Indiana, only threw about 3 passes, but he played the final drive against Michigan and led them. He threw some impressive balls and looked
went down
good
the field, got a touchdown. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm saying that not knowing how good he is, but just that I've seen him, play 2 or 3 drives. But yeah, I'm trying to think who Penn State. Of course, they've got this game against Minnesota. This is a a game for two reeling teams that had higher expectations, and the loser could really continue to slide and have a bad season.
Still don't know if Tanner Morgan might be a go this weekend. I still haven't heard, so that could make that game interesting. I was looking at that line at 4.5, by the way, which I thought was a little bit low with Penn State playing at home.
Yeah, and maybe I'm making a bit of an assumption that his backup is probably not ready.
Right.
Just because Minnesota doesn't tend to recruit well at quarterback. So
That's right.
I don't think they've got a Drew Aller on their hands backing up Tanner Morgan.
Yeah, unless Ibrahim goes, ballistic at running back, that's the only way I could really see Minnesota pulling that out, especially if they have to go with the second string quarterback.
Yeah.
Want to get to the other conferences. I know I've been dubbed the Big Ten guy by the people in the chat, but hey,
it could be worse than that. That's for sure.
That's true. I've heard
you could be
worse.
the Pac-12 guy, for example.
Well, we've had enough of that. It was called Last Night, which I didn't mind talking to the Pac-12 guys and kicking around some Pac-12 football. But to the ACC, I take it you are not quite a buyer in Clemson as a solid playoff team.
They just played Wake Forest, NC State, and Florida State. And aside from a really strong, solid, dominant second half against NC State, they look like a good team. They look like what we typically expect of Notre Dame or Penn State or somebody who's a top 10 or 15 team in the country. But I think Ohio State, Georgia would have won those in convincing fashion.
More convincing fashion. Yeah.
They surprisingly, with that great defensive front, they gave up over 6 yards per carry against Florida State last week.
Yeah, I thought that they struggled against Wake Forest, but I gave Hartman and those Wake Forest receivers some credit in that game for causing some problems. I thought they looked good, and we talked about it after the NC State win that they got at home. My thing is, and I just wonder if you think this is it, because maybe you're hearing this from other people, whether Clemson is actually playoff good or willing to contend on playoff good. How much is this do you think is people comparing Clemson to the Clemson of old, or are people just comparing them to the actual other four best teams in the country?
Both.
Okay.
So I have to think that it's tough to shake what we saw with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and elite wide receiver cores.
Yeah.
They've improved considerably from last year, but they're still light years away from delivering that kind of performance. They're capable in the passing game now. They're competent. They've got a top 30, 40. I don't know what the stats are, but they've got a top 30 or 40 passing attack. But they don't have a top 3 passing attack like they did with those guys. And I also would say that if you compare how they're playing against their opponents versus what Ohio State and Georgia, especially Georgia, since we have seen them against Oregon in particular, and then also against mid-level South Carolina, Auburn, maybe mid-level SEC teams and just crush them. This game against Syracuse, I don't know that that's going to prove much to us. Now, if they struggle against Syracuse, I think it's going to tell us more if they struggle against Syracuse than it is if they go out and win 38-14. I think that's going to be a nice win, but what's Syracuse done this year? Who are they? Realistically, they're a nice story. I would love for them to take off and pull off the miracle and continue on, but they're the 40th best team in the country.
Yeah, because even back when, and kind of comparing them to the Clemson teams of previous years, what's interesting, Mark, is we always knew that the ACC was weak when they were running through it, but remember they were running through it in a more dominant fashion with those previous teams.
Yeah.
To that point of them as a playoff team, you do believe, and I talked about this with the Pac-12 guys. Bottom line, a one-loss Pac-12 champion, one-loss Big 12 champion makes it in over a one-loss Clemson champion?
So give me a loss. Give me a
Okay.
loss by Clemson. It can't be in the conference championship game.
Let's say it's within the next few weeks. Maybe Miami gets them, or I don't know, somebody trips them up. I'm not saying they're going to lose at Notre Dame either, and I'm really having a hard time finding one, but they stubbed their toe somewhere.
Well, the best teams that they're going to play are Notre Dame, Syracuse, and Miami, I guess. Yeah, they've already played the best teams in the Atlantic. And South Carolina. Those are all, I think, right in that same range. Their loss is most likely going to be a more damaging loss than a TCU loss, because who's TCU going to lose to? Texas?
Right.
Well, that's the most likely candidate.
I was going to go there. I was looking at their schedule. I think their 2 toughest games are Texas, and do they have Kansas State still left, Mark?
Yeah. Oh, they're playing tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. This weekend. So I think it's Kansas State and Texas. So, see, I think if TCU splits those 2 games and then wins the Big 12 championship game with a win over one of those 2 teams, a win over Oklahoma State, and a win in the Big 12 championship game, that's not an awful resume, Mark. That's a decent resume.
It's a decent resume. Notre Dame or Clemson will be given some credit depending on, hey, the voices in the room. Some will give credit for a Notre Dame, South Carolina non-conference schedule that is much better than a Colorado non-conference schedule.
Okay.
So they do have that. That's TCU's non-conference win.
Right.
And they beat SMU. They beat SMU in Colorado.
Right.
And who else are you throwing in there? Anybody?
Well, I said a Pac-12 champion. So if it is the 1-loss Oregon, and let's say they beat an undefeated UCLA this week and beat, maybe USC in the championship game, or vice versa, maybe USC beats UCLA and then beats a 1-loss UCLA team and then beats Oregon in the championship game.
I think that USC has the best chance at having a resume that can be excused, or a loss that can be excused, losing at Utah by 1 point on a 2-point conversion in a pretty controversial game with a lot of questions.
Were you going to go there with the refs, Mark?
Well, not as vehemently as our Pac-12 guys, am I?
Right.
Hey, that stuff's going to be talked about in that room. It's going to be like, okay, well, USC lost, but really? It was kind of questionable, and it was super close. It wasn't Oregon lost to Georgia by 46 points. Clemson lost to a 7-5 Notre Dame team. Whatever that turns out to be for those other teams, it's not going to look as good as USC's loss if this is just the one.
Right. Yeah, well, I think it's going to be interesting, because I'm not saying Clemson could stub their toe, because I think, bottom line, Clemson goes undefeated, they're in.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, they just are.
Yeah.
But if there's a possibility for the Big 12, or I'm trying to be the opposite of the real MVP. I'm trying to get some other teams, and although here's the one thing about the SEC. If Georgia beats, runs the table and wins the SEC, and let's say they knock off Alabama and they give Alabama their second loss, which they could have put Alabama out of their misery in the SEC championship game last year, and Alabama wouldn't have been a playoff team if they would have beaten them. Are we sure that they would take then a 1-loss Tennessee at that point, even though they didn't win their division and didn't make it to a championship game?
Are we sure? No. But they're going to be strongly considered. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, they're going to be strongly considered. They're going to, let's say they lose to Georgia by a touchdown. And they beat Alabama.
Right.
They beat Kentucky. They beat LSU.
Okay.
The resume is not crazy good.
Well, I know everybody in the SEC is the 85 Bears. I get it. But I think there's some teams in the Big Ten that could beat Kentucky. I think there's some teams in the Big Ten that could beat LSU.
Absolutely.
So there's some middle tier SEC that isn't the 85 Bears. I just want to say that.
Like I pointed out to our Pac-12 boys the other night, because they were ragging on the Big Ten, I reminded them that these 2 bad Big Ten losses to the Pac-12, Michigan State and Wisconsin, have turned out not to be look at the rankings that those teams had at the time that they lost to those Pac-12 teams. Michigan State was the 11th ranked team in the country, and Wisconsin was like 13th or 14th in the country. Well, they're two of the 4 or 5 worst teams in the Big Ten. They have been drubbed in the Big Ten just like they were by those two teams. So the Pac-12 did not beat these two teams that then, came back to the Big Ten and were contending teams.
True. It's a good point. Well, I mean, it's going to wash itself out. We're going to have the 2 big games. I mean, I think Alabama beats Mississippi State. I think their fate's decided in Oxford at Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's the game. LSU has mathematically they have destiny in their own hands. They can control their own destiny, but they're not playing consistently enough or well enough or offensively have the firepower to show that they can beat Ole Miss and Alabama.
That's true. All right, last thing on picks. I'm going to follow you and Merrill on your picks. By the way, great records. But real quick, I know you're not great on overs, but what's your feeling on Oregon, UCLA, 70.5 on the total over in that game? You banking that to be a high-scoring game? I've been loving Pac-12 overs lately.
He threw 72 at me was his over-under.
Oh, okay.
And so if you can find 70.5, then that's your, well, it's a 37-34 game. So
38-35, maybe something like that.
Sure. I was just looking for the closest to get you over. That's close to the point spread. Yeah, I would tend to go. Well, look at UC. Look at those two teams playing the best teams on their schedule. Oregon played a 44-41, 85 points against Washington State. They played the BYU game. They held them down defensively. That's the only thing. Oregon's got a pretty good defense.
Right.
UCLA, Utah was a ton of points. What was that? Like 45-35, I think it was. 80.
Well, yeah. UCLA, Utah was 42-32.
No, that's what I was going for. Okay,
Yeah.
74 points. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I hit on.
So yeah, I would tend to go over on that. I need to start predicting over-unders because I just have no idea how good I would be at it. I don't know.
I'm just reading the quarterback matchups. When I see, big-time quarterback matchups, I'm kind of, I used to write it in those old Big 12 days, those Graham Harrell, Colt McCoy, Sam Bradford back in the day, except they start setting those overs way too high for my blood there after a while.
Sure. Well, Merrill brought up 2 good points, and they seem to be obvious, but I don't know that I've thought about them in the past. The overplay in a football game is the only play in sports where, or at least in football, is the only play where you can win before the game's over. Like you can rest easy. Like his big under the radar pick last week was Kansas, Oklahoma over. And that game was 64 and they scored 94. It wasn't even close. They had it sometime mid third quarter and you're done. You won. You're good. And then the other point is obviously overtime impacts it in such a way that helps the over.
Taking the Buckeyes minus 32, Mark, this week.
32?
Minus 30. I got it at 30.
Okay, you said okay as well.
At 30.
Yes. Did you see my prediction video?
I have not yet. I'll take a look at it.
Give it a look.
Before I put my wager in, I will consult Steve Merrill and Mark Rogers before I make my picks.
Well, I will tell you what Steve Merrill said. So I posted a separate preview and prediction. So my thoughts, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to start putting a prediction on these as well as the preview. And Steve, though, we did our other section. Well, his math model has Ohio State right on that number, 30. So he's not leaning. It's not like the math says this is a slam dunk either way. It's kind of like, you should probably stay away from this one because he's got it right on 30.
Unless they reincarnate Chuck Long, I can't see Iowa scoring in this game, Mark. Don't see it.
You know what I found funny was, and I kidded Corey, our buddy Corey on the Iowa channel about this, because I mentioned to him, I don't know how many times during the offseason,
Yeah.
when you bring up having to play Ohio State, we haven't played Ohio State in 5 years, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I said, you know what the point spread's going to be in that game? And he's like, what? And I said, it's going to be at least 3 touchdowns. It's going to be like 22, 25. And he thought I was insane. Like 25 points? There's no way against Iowa they're going to be a 25-point favorite. I said, yeah, they are.
Well, I'm riding with it. I know you got other callers, Mark. I'm going to talk to you again on Saturday, my friend.
Thanks, David. Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
And to our buddy Corey, of course, I say that with all due respect and with all affection there. Corey's great, but and I just found that kind of funny. All right, who do we got here? We got Sean's on the line. Sean, what's going on?
Not much. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, well, I did have listening to the real MVP. All due respect, love his energy, love his passion for the sport. I had a million problems with how he broke down the potential for this expanded playoff. And your last caller, I think, alluded to it a little bit. I think there's a little bit of a deification going on with the SEC going on. Like, are they the best conference? Yes. Do they have are they the strongest at the top? Yes. Are they the deepest? Yes. But to think that they'll just run, that the third and fourth place teams will come in and just like make mincemeat out of the Big 12, Big 10 champions, out of the other teams in there, I think it's pretty misguided. And it doesn't hold up to much evidence. And I mean, I think Alabama and the occasional, Georgia teams, and Georgia probably as a program now, and LSU teams, like the strength of some of the very, very top teams have kind of skewed people's perception overall about just how dominant they are. If you get to like the fourth and fifth teams in the SEC, they're fairly comparable to like the third and fourth teams in other Power 5 conferences. Okay. When they play them, those are competitive games.
Okay.
And I remember him saying something like a lot of these other games with four teams, we've had a lot of bad playoff games, a lot of lopsided ones. And that to me, I think just speaks to how much of a teardrop there is from the very, very best teams in the country to just the merely like really good teams. Yeah. I mean, Alabama is, especially with a month to prepare, a month to get healthy, is generally going to beat up on the number 4 team in a neutral environment. And, I think the way to make the playoffs exciting is actually to get these 5 through 12 matchups. Like those will be exciting games. Like those are going to be teams of pretty comparable skill level and talent. And I mean, the bowl season is, I mean, it's so irrelevant now. I hardly pay attention. I hardly care anymore. And I used to be all about it. I used to get into it deeply. But,
why?
What?
You need to tell us why.
Why what?
Why did you like the bowls? How long ago was that? 10 years ago?
Or possibly a little bit longer. One was maybe I was a little bit younger and a little, fewer things to distract me in my life. So there was, but that, I mean, it really seemed as though they kind of mattered to a lot of teams when you start having like these mid-level games and these players dropping out, and sometimes you see more and more just teams sort of mail in performances in the bowl games.
You realize you're mailing it in?
Oh, in certain situations, absolutely. Like I don't know. You'll see you'll see a team that went like 7-5 in the SEC show up and just get destroyed by the fourth place team in the ACC on a case. I mean, like you see some games where it's just they're just bad. And lately, there've been a lot more just terrible bowl games than really good ones.
Yeah, see, I need more evidence than that. I would need examples of that. I will back up your first point by saying Mississippi State got blown out by Texas Tech last year, but yeah. I don't see that as evidence that just because they're an SEC team and they got killed, that means that they didn't try and nobody cared. And I don't see the one huge sample of evidence that I see there had to do with Dan Mullen's failed leadership at Florida and him being again a poor leader and taking his team that lost the SEC championship game in 2020, going to the Cotton Bowl and basically making a bunch of excuses because he had opt-outs and not preparing his team, and then they got completely annihilated.
Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, they lost whatever 55 to I don't even remember what the score was. They got killed. But that boy, all you had to do was listen to Dan Mullen talk. He dismissed half his team. He disengaged from his team. He made comments like he didn't even acknowledge the players that are on the field as being his team. This isn't even a Florida team. Now that's a pathetic thing to say as a leader. I contrast that with Mac Brown, who took his North Carolina team to the Orange Bowl to play a top 5 team, Texas A&M, and he didn't have his 2 best running backs, his 2 best wide receivers, his best defensive player, Chaz Surratt, and they fought, they played hard, and it was a 1-score game with a minute left in the game. And they showed themselves to fight football and play a football game. So yeah, I'm not saying that, but shoot, I see games every week where I question defenders' willingness to make tackles. Every week. I see that in regular season games.
Yeah. I mean, this is obviously just sort of, I haven't compiled the data and done like a thorough sabermetric analysis of this, but I'm just saying I really do feel, and I think most people agree, and I think the television ratings back up, that the bowl season has gotten a bit stale, but it doesn't mean really what it used to mean.
Oh, well, that's all true. I get that, but that doesn't mean that the players aren't playing hard and that the games aren't as good. It means that people have a gold medal mentality in this country. Therefore, the bowls do not convert to a championship. They have nothing to do with the playoffs and the championship. And therefore, people have caught on to that, and they view it in such a way that now we have a playoff, so the bowls they don't matter. At the same time, understand that, are you a college basketball fan?
Mildly, marginally, tangentially, yeah.
But people at times make a big deal out of a North Carolina Duke regular season game or whatever you want to throw in there. These bowl games get watched. More people watch the Bahamas Bowl or watch the Poinsettia Bowl than watch a regular season college basketball game that's hyped up. These bowl games get tremendous TV ratings.
Really?
They do. Absolutely, they do.
It just shows how dominant football is in this country. How good of a spectator sport football is too. That people will watch games that have virtually very little meaning other than to the teams involved.
We're only in week 8. How many games could we go through that are going to be played on Saturday that don't have much meaning?
Well, a whole lot of them.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Well, we don't say that.
Oh, absolutely.
And those bowl games that you enjoyed 10 or 15 years ago, what meaning did they have?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, I mean, I guess everything has as much meaning as you give it, as much as you ascribe to.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I remember,
except for the championship, because either the championship has a whole lot of meaning because
Yes.
that's why they're playing, or if it doesn't have meaning to you, then you obviously don't care about the
Right.
sport, or you just determined I don't care about the championship. But the championship has a tangible meaning, and the conference championships have a tangible meaning. But you're right, all the rest of it, it depends on. When Ohio State used to play Michigan with nothing on the line from a tangible sense, it was still the most important game in the world to me. It's more important than the Super Bowl. It was more important than anything.
yeah, Purdue and Indiana play every single year at the end of it. Most of the times, neither one of them are going to a bowl game. They're both bad. And I mean, it sure means a lot to the fans, to the people playing it. I mean, those games sell out every single year. The old Oak and Bucket games.
Sure.
So,
College football. It's
yeah, absolutely. So, and question about Tennessee right now. I'm having a hard time to I definitely think this is a good football team without question. I don't really know how real this team is as a potentially elite roster this year. It's a potentially elite squad. The real MVP made one point there about TCU. Like, what would TCU? What would the game be against Alabama, Georgia, or Tennessee? It would be like a 21-point game. He said.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true at all. TCU and Tennessee play this weekend. If they played in Fort Worth, I would take TCU.
Well, let's say they're playing in Chicago. They're playing in a neutral site. They're playing at the Rose Bowl.
I think that would be. I would take the over in that game for sure, whatever it is. And I think it would be from what I've seen from Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee went to overtime with Pitt. They had a battle against Florida. Those aren't like, I mean, obviously they rose up in a game of the century environment and knocked off Bama.
And I think you're hitting on the difference between these schools and these teams and the high level talent that we see with the SEC teams and on occasion a Clemson and Ohio State, et cetera, when they get into a championship or a playoff. So, for example, let's take the LSU-Oklahoma game in 2019 playoff.
Yeah.
Complete obliteration. LSU had 49 points. They had 7 touchdowns at halftime. Okay. If they played in the regular season, do we think that would have happened? Did not LSU have much milder scores against less competition? Yes. I think when you get to a playoff setting, the reason we see these blowouts is because the talent elevation under that level of focus and intensity just raises. If you take all those great teams throughout the playoff era, 2014 Ohio State, 15, 16 Alabama Clemson teams, all those teams, did they play close regular season games against fairly marginal teams? Yes. But when they had to be laser focused, game planned for a particular team and their talent level was maximized to the hilt, they even took teams that were the 4th or 5th best teams in the country and they blew them out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, where do you fall on this Tennessee team being in there? Like, are they a team that just in that moment? I mean, the Georgia game is going to say a lot.
I, like you, saw them. I saw the Pitt game. I watched the Pitt game, and was it impressive? No. It was impressive for what I thought about Tennessee at the time. Okay, they got a good road win against the top 20-ish team. Well, I don't know that Pitt's really that good. And we got to acknowledge that teams change. Yeah. Teams mature, they get better. They mostly all get better, but because of injuries and because of a few other things, some of them get worse. So you've got to be better later in the season because most teams are getting better because they get reps and they gel and all that. So, yeah, this is the argument we have all the time concerning just about everybody. The argument that, okay, we saw it once out of Tennessee, but it was at this fever pitch in Knoxville. The place was going crazy. Did they just ride momentum and just have a hot game and they took down Alabama, who's Alabama, but they're committing a lot of mistakes, doing a lot of things that aren't Alabama-like. Is this really a great Alabama team? And we start to disclaim all these things and then look at the rest of Tennessee's schedule and say they beat a couple decent teams, Pitt and Florida, by not that much.
They did hammer LSU.
They did hammer LSU.
In Baton Rouge.
That was and people discount LSU, but I still think, hey, their roster's loaded. They're good. They're a top 15 to 25 team. I don't care what the record says or where they land because their schedule's tough. So yeah, Tennessee's done it a few times now. They did, yeah, exactly. They did go to Death Valley and they did what they did to LSU. I would say that if TCU and Tennessee got on the same field, I would, without a doubt, I wouldn't even think twice making my predictions. Tennessee's going to win. Boom. Now, in terms of the point spread, somebody said, I'm going to give you 21. Yeah, just out of sheer TCU is going to score. What are they going to score? 35, 37? I'm just going to take the 21 just because that's a lot of points and because TCU can backdoor cover at the end or something like that. But I'm taking Tennessee like that. I'm not even thinking about it.
And what would TCU have to do the rest of the year in a Big 12 schedule to really convince you right now? They've got, I don't know, maybe their toughest game the rest of the season coming up this weekend, or one of their top 2 or 3.
This should be one of the top. Well, they just played the team that I was not necessarily knew that was the best team in the league, but I was the most sure about Oklahoma State in terms of who they are. And they had an impressive comeback and they won the game. Texas is by far the most talented team in the league. And Kansas State's limited, but they're a good team. Mm-hmm. They're top 25-ish good. So I guess Texas and Kansas State are going to be the two. Who else do they have that would be? They already Baylor. Let's not think too much of TCU. They could lose to Baylor. They could lose to, they barely slipped by Kansas.
Yeah, the Big 12 is shockingly deep this year.
Absolutely.
I mean, this has not been a strong.
There's not a bad team in the league. There's not a Northwestern or Vanderbilt in the league.
No, it's like every game's going to be relatively difficult, relatively tough, and if you can make it through a schedule like that with 0 or 1 losses, they do have a championship game, right? Yes. Forgot. Yes. So I mean, their road, that seems a little too difficult for me to think that they'll run that table, but I don't know.
It's one of those deals where can TCU beat all those teams? Of course they can beat all of them. Yeah. They could go undefeated. They are not playing Georgia. But the odds of it happening are just astronomically low.
Yeah, like even if they were like something like a 70 to 80% likelihood of winning each individual game, the chances of them winning all of them would still be down around like 15%.
Exactly. And they're not at 70 or 80 against Kansas State or Texas. Exactly.
No.
Yeah, there's not a bad team in the league. Texas Tech, Kansas are supposed to be the worst teams. They're not bad. They're not bad at all.
It's a welcome development this year. I mean, like all of the other 3 Power 5 teams. I'll say just one last point, and then I'll move on, or I'll leave. All the 3 sort of bottom, the 3 leagues that kind of have been getting kicked around the past 5-6 years. The Big 12, Pac-12, ACC. They've all kind of stepped up this year. They're all performing at better levels than probably they were expected to coming into the season, and definitely better than they've been lately.
The Pac-12 for sure. The Big 12 we've already gone over. The ACC, the ACC's been so lousy. I guess it's gotten better.
Last year, Pitt won the league at like 11-2, and I think they were ranked. They were ranked like 15th or something in the final poll. I mean, it was not a good league at all last year. I mean, last year they were embarrassing. But
Pitt won the league and they lost to Western Michigan.
Michigan, yes, exactly. So I mean, it's actually, I mean, it's the Big Ten has kind of fallen flat this year, and that's probably about the only league that really has disappointed.
So we will move on here in a second, but I'm just give me 10 or 15 seconds on why the Big Ten's not why they have, but what's your evidence that the Big Ten's not that good?
I'm not necessarily saying they're not that good, but you have in most of the pivotal non-conference games, they have not shown up. They have not won. Ohio State, by far the best team in the country, struggled, had a fight with what looks to be a very mediocre Notre Dame team.
Okay.
You had the Penn State blowout of Auburn. Auburn's one of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the SEC, probably. And we need to move on. So without going through all of it, I would just say I agree with you that the Big Ten does not look good and that they lost some games out of the conference. But at the same time, I just think there's a lack of sample size there to really go on. And again, you may have heard me say to a previous caller, the Michigan State loss to Washington, the Wisconsin loss to Washington State looked like the Pac-12 was defeating 2 contending teams they were both ranked in the top 15 in the country at the time. Well, what have they turned out to be? What is Michigan State and what is Wisconsin doing? They're borderline.
What are they doing against the rest of the Big Ten? They're getting their butts kicked. So
but that's also part of it, is that like some of the sort of the strong second tier of the program has just not been good of the league.
Well, I understand that.
Been good. Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan State.
But what about Illinois? What about Maryland?
Yeah. Some of the traditionally weaker teams are doing better this year. But
so why don't they get credit for supplanting Wisconsin and Michigan State?
Something just sort of there could just be a little bit of preconceived bias in it. We don't necessarily think that
because we all have to understand once the leagues start playing against each other, they all go 500. So nothing's really proven about the league. What's being proven is the distribution within the league.
Yeah, but generally I would say, like, if you have a fairly flat distribution, like I would say the Big Ten West looks like about the flattest division, and it's usually just a sign of mediocrity and not necessarily a sign of very, very strong parity.
Okay.
So
all right, John.
Thank you, Mark.
I appreciate it. Have a good night. All right, 2 to go. We got Will on the line. Will, good to see you. What's going on?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for coming on my show.
Of course.
That was a lot of fun.
I am now subscribed to the 2 best. I don't want to leave Jeffrey out of the 2 best college football channels on YouTube. Subscribe to both.
Thanks, Mark. Mark, I'm so sick of these SEC fans saying, "Oh, we have the best league in the world." I mean, they are right.
Well, Have you heard me say this, Will? Have you heard me say I want to have a conversation about that? I want to have a debate, but you can't have a debate.
Yeah. Why are these teams playing these FCS teams in the middle of their conference slate? This is what I'm sick of.
You're talking about the SEC?
With the UT Martin.
Because they can? Why?
We need to stop this. We need some legislature to stop this from happening.
I agree.
This is ridiculous.
There should be a scheduling committee. There should be, for as much as I am against committees, hear me out, folks. We have a scheduling metric. We have a formula, but the committee just kind of regulates it. They just, absolutely. I'm right there with you. These teams should not be doing their own schedules.
They're the only Power 5 conference to do this, right? I don't think any other team does this like at this part of the season.
They're the only one.
And it's ridiculous. Like, if it really means more, make every game mean more. Make every game a big time game that could change the shape of their conference.
Well, to be fair, Will, they just distribute the games throughout the schedule differently than the other conferences. They're not playing any more or less FCS teams than anybody else is.
All right. Well,
they just space them out later in the season, and they like to play them the week before their big rivalry games in November. I don't know if they're doing that this year, but that's what they usually do. You know, Alabama plays the Citadel, and Auburn plays Chattanooga the week before they play each other, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I don't know. Like, I feel like every game at this point should make a difference. Like, I'm fine if you do one like at the beginning of the year. Like, I don't like the cupcakes. I think they're bad. It's bad for the sport. But if it funds the teams, it funds the teams. But just doing it right now, I don't know. Just to hammer it in the point, it just doesn't make sense. Like it.
Oh, you're Notre Dame.
We play
FCS
relevant
team, right?
team. I mean, yeah, we're gonna play Navy, but we're gonna play like.
Well, Notre Dame has never played an FCS, right?
Well, we will be soon, but yeah.
Why? Who is it?
I think we're only playing HBCUs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a different initiative.
Yeah. But I don't know. Like, we're seeing like Iowa, Ohio State. I mean, that's a big conference game, even though I'm not going to watch it most likely. We have Syracuse, Clemson. We have Ole Miss, LSU, UCLA, Oregon, and then UT, Tennessee, Martin, Tennessee. Like, it just sticks out like a sore thumb when you look at the game for this week.
I want to see if they're playing these games the second to last weekend of the season, as they typically do. No, they got rid of. Well, there's a few of them. The second to last week, Texas A&M's playing UMass, Missouri's playing New Mexico State, Mississippi State's playing East Tennessee State, LSU's playing UAB, Auburn's playing Western Kentucky, Alabama's playing Austin Peay. There you go. That's on November 19th. Almost the entire league are playing crappy teams.
It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, it's bad.
Mark, I know you hate. I mean, I don't know. I feel like you kind of hate answering this question, but I'm just going to give it to you. Who, if you had to choose one, who would you pick to be the Heisman Trophy winner if you had to vote on it?
I would love the Heisman Trophy if I got to vote on it.
Yeah, if only Mark Rogers could pick the Heisman Trophy winner right now.
Right now, without looking at the stats, and you understand I'm a very measured person, so I would want to study and look at the numbers and compare, but on the spot.
Because this is what most Heisman Trophy voters do. They just do on the spot. They don't look at the stats.
Yeah. I would even go beyond looking at the stats. I would do all sorts of metric splits and so forth. And I would vote for Hendon Hooker.
Mm.
Yep.
So, yeah. I would think you'd either pick Hendon or CJ Stroud. The thing is, though, this is so, like, I don't know. Like, I kind of have a connection to Virginia Tech, and I was looking at another college football Discord. I'm not really active in it, but I just look at what people post. It's not the Voice College Football one. And apparently they had Jalen Hyatt committed to VT before Hendon Hooker left.
Hmm.
And then he flipped to Tennessee.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
That's so crazy, man. Like, Justin Fuente just was not a great Power 5 level coach.
No, he wasn't.
You can't lose those two guys.
He inherited a pretty good team,
and
obviously went to a conference championship game. But, yeah, I just Googled that. So, yeah, 2023 star wide receiver Jalen Hyatt commits to Virginia Tech. There's an article in, 2019. So there you go. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There he is. February of 19. Committed to the Hokies. And that's a bad football team right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, who knows? They could. I mean, no, they won't win the Coastal, but I don't know. Maybe they'll win a couple games. Mark, what's your watch schedule for this weekend?
Watch schedule. This is the way we would set it up this weekend. And you got to realize that I am biased, of course. So I've gone from watching every Ohio State game start to finish during my life to I didn't watch the Rutgers game. I didn't watch the Bowling Green or Toledo game. I don't watch those games now because I'm doing this and I'm committed to watching the best games. So at noon, the game I want to see more than any other game at noon is Tennessee UT Martin. No, Clemson Syracuse. I want to see that game.
That's a good one,
Maybe a
Mark.
deal where it's 28-3 in the second quarter. So I'm like, okay, bye. I'm done with it. But to start, Clemson Syracuse is going to be my number one choice. My number two choice is going to be Ohio State and Iowa. Again, may have to move on from that. This is the worst group of noon games we've seen in a long time. Actually, noon has been the best window of college football this season. I guess my third game, there's a lot of games like Cincinnati and SMU, Kansas, Baylor. Like those games really don't mean much, Kansas, Baylor, but they're going to be playing for bowl games. They're decent teams, but they're out of it at this point. They're not going to win the Big 12. You know what game would be my third game at 12:30? And I usually watch 3 games, but it's on ESPN 3. It's Miami and Duke.
Did you see how much tickets are as low as for that game on
I
ESPN.com?
can only imagine.
$5. $5 to see that.
I got excited about Duke last week because I caught him at the end against North Carolina, and I was pulling for him.
$5 a ticket.
That's crazy. Yeah, I saw Miami make some kind of big play the last time they were at home. So that would have been like 2 weeks ago, and they were showing the stands, and this dude was dancing up and down the aisles, and he was able to go in between the seats and hop the seats, and somebody made fun of him because they were like, you can do this at a Miami game because nobody's there. So yeah.
Oh man, $5. That's so bad.
I don't have Peacock.
Yeah. Well, some Peacock stuff's for free. You just have to watch ads.
Gotcha.
But hopefully,
gotcha.
I don't know, because I don't have an account, so hopefully I won't have to make one.
They're not going to lure me in on the UNLV game.
Yeah.
So we got 3 really good games at 3:30. Ole Miss, LSU, UCLA, Oregon, Texas, Oklahoma State. And I will tell our Pac-12 friends out there, believe it or not, if I could only watch one game on Saturday, I would watch Oregon, UCLA. So I'll be watching those 3. And I'm somewhat intrigued that Wisconsin could possibly give Purdue a game.
Oh, I don't think Michael will like that.
It's the 3:30 game on ESPN. So that takes us into there's usually a Fox 4 o'clock game, but I don't see it here.
They did the 3:30 instead for UCLA, Oregon.
Oh, yeah. So then we get down to the 4 o'clock. Yeah, you got some bad SEC and Pac-12 games. Who cares? And then we get to the primetime window, and I'm hoping Mississippi State can give Alabama a game, but I'm kind of doubting it. Penn State, Minnesota is an odd selection for the ABC primetime game, especially they're both coming off losses.
Kansas State TCU is interesting.
Oh, yeah. I missed that game. When are they playing?
8 on the Fox Sports 1.
Oh, yeah. There's your best primetime game and in your most meaningful primetime game. Yeah, absolutely. And, this game doesn't mean anything, but Texas A&M, South Carolina gives me some I do like to see talent on the field, and I am a little SEC and somewhat Big Ten bias. I know I am. I tend to favor those leagues when I choose my viewing habits. Boise State Air Force used to be a good game, but
Air Force will beat up on them. Well, maybe not. I don't
Oregon
know. I haven't
State
been
could get to
following the teams
6-2.
at all.
So yeah, that's pretty much how I will look at my Saturday. On the
Mhm.
surface, it's not a great Saturday, but there's certainly, of course, enough games that are important.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, an under the radar decent matchup
Vandy, Missouri.
between marginal teams. I was going to say West Virginia, Texas Tech.
Oh yeah.
So there's the TV schedule, Will.
Mm-hmm. I think there'll be good games. It might just be not. I would want just. It
Yeah.
just won't be marquee games.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Oh, there will be good games. There's no doubt about that.
Mhm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. I don't know, man. If Duke could beat Miami, that would really make things interesting in the Coastal.
Yeah. Oh, I see that tonight that great South Alabama team that lost to UCLA by 1 point lost to Troy. So maybe we can put away our discussions about South Alabama being a legitimate football team.
Mm-hmm. It's a shame that James Madison can't compete in a bowl game against a
Yeah.
Power 5 team this year.
Somebody needs to explain that rule to me.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Okay, they qualified to be elevated to FBS, so they met whatever qualifications, attendance, etc., whatever the qualification. So why can't they compete? What? It makes no sense to me. What do they have to prove?
Is it like a penalty? I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't
Yeah.
get it either. All right, Will.
All right,
Anything
Mark.
else?
I just wanted to pop in and thank you.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of other things. to say.
Absolutely. It was fun. I was glad that somebody tipped me off to you guys getting together there. So I was thinking that maybe you would, since I jumped in there and I had a few comebacks to some of your topics, I thought, these guys are going to be like, why does Mark have to show up and argue with everything that we're saying?
No. It's the voice. It's the voice. We have to talk back to the voice.
All right, we'll enjoy the games on Saturday.
Of
And
course.
we'll be live tomorrow night if you get a chance to stop by.
Yeah, I'll try to stop by.
So I don't know that we've got a decent game tomorrow. We don't. No. No, we don't. Temple and Tulsa. Yikes.
Battle to be the second to last best team in the American, I guess.
UAB in Western Kentucky. Yeah. Why wouldn't college see? This is the other thing that could be taken care of with a college football commissioner, with a scheduling committee, and all that. It's Friday night. There's nothing to show. We want college football to be in the spotlight. At least we're going to have one good game. I would always have like at least 2 or 3 good games. Start one at like 6 p.m. Then kick off one at like 7:30, and then do a West Coast game, Mountain West game. Why would the sport not want to have a game on a Friday night? Nobody's going to watch these games.
Yeah.
I don't know. Move Texas Tech and West Virginia to Friday night.
That would be a great game.
And then put, what games people don't watch generally? Put the Boise State Air Force game as the
that would be
second game of the doubleheader on Friday night.
Yeah.
This is going to be my next video.
That would be a good one, Mark.
This is how the college football schedule could have been structured from a TV standpoint this season to give us, and we could get to see teams that we don't get to see. I don't watch Air Force play.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind watching them play, but I'm not going to not watch the Alabama-Tennessee game because Air Force is playing. Yeah. All right, Will. Appreciate you being here.
We need to be the committee. The knuckleheads and Mark need to be the committee.
There we go.
Yeah, that would fix everything.
Well, we need to get more influence on social media. We're getting there.
We're getting there.
one follower at a time.
When I'm still stuck at 38,000 subscribers and you and Jeffrey are just jetting by me, then, you guys don't forget about me.
Of course not.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's hear Michael talk up his Boilermakers.
Yes, let's hear it.
All right.
Thanks, Will. We'll see
Good
you.
night, Mark.
I appreciate that nobody's reading my banner that says that Will and Michael are the final two callers. Connor, I'm sorry. Christopher, I'm sorry. We've been on here for 2.5 hours. And you know what? The first thing I said when I came on, I said we're going to do a tight 40 minutes because I'm getting off at midnight. We're done at midnight. And here we are at 2:34 now. Michael, how you doing tonight?
Not too bad. Yourself, Mark?
I'm good. What's up?
I'm on the table my original piece I was going to talk about. So for another time and stuff, because that's going to take a few minutes and stuff. And I feel bad for J-Dub not getting a chance to get on here. But I got to ask you this. You said you go with Tim the Hooker. Right now, I'm going with Chase Brown from Illinois. What's your thought? What's your take about him?
Well, he's having a tremendous year. And of course, Illinois is having a resurgent year. So he's a great candidate for that. He's run for over 100 yards, I think something like 8 consecutive games going back to last season. So he's a great selection. However, I know that it's supposed to go to the best player, but I also would, even though part of me wants to think about all players in college football, because I think it's become a quarterback and then to a second degree skill position award, that Hendon Hooker is more important to his team than Chase Brown is. Hello?
Oh, there.
Yes.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I had to mute myself. And not bad. I was wondering, did you get a hold of Coach Fromm earlier this week?
Did I hear him?
No, did you actually call him and tell me to calm down this week? About the Wisconsin game?
Oh, I told you to calm down. No, I told you to focus on the Wisconsin game, that you should embrace the Wisconsin game because you were looking ahead to the Illinois game.
Well, somehow, some way, a little birdie must have told Coach Fromm that too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he said, calm down, just take one game at a time and stuff like that. It will happen and stuff like that. But I think it's going to be a combination run. I think it'll be pretty much close to like it was last week against Nebraska and stuff with Purdue and Wisconsin and stuff. But one other thing I'm trying to figure out is a couple of people were bringing up in the stream and stuff like that with the low ratings and stuff like that. You wonder why they don't get something. Because I remember a few years ago, didn't they have like some good games on Friday night? Like Nevada beat Boise State and like Fresno State a few years ago.
We've had all sorts of good games on Friday night. Who did we have? We had just last week or the week before, we had a good game on Friday night. I can't remember who. We had Florida State Louisville played a good game on a Friday night. We've had others.
Yep. I was just wondering stuff like that because a lot of people are saying because mostly high school football, which I can get. But if you look at some of the high school, Mark, it's probably been what? The early 2000s, last time you've been to a high school football game to cover it or watch?
The last time I went to a high school football game, good Lord. I announced my last high school football game in 1994, and I'm trying to think if I've been to one since. Oh, well, I've been to my son's. My son played high school football. Besides him as a fan, I went to go see his high school football games. So besides that, no. But my son, yes.
Yep, not bad.
My son, who actually played in the highest scoring game in the history of Connecticut high school football.
Oh, wow. Did they end up winning that game?
Yeah, they won like 72-48.
Oh, did he play on the good side or the bad side? The good side's offense, by the way.
No, he played defensive back.
Oh, well, yeah, I call that the dark side. But no, I was wondering, all right, Mark, I'm sure you probably want to get some dinner and stuff like that since you haven't probably ate since like noon today. So, I will look forward. I don't know if you did it last Saturday or not, but did you actually do that where you just open it up and don't let people chat during the games and stuff? And is that if you was be something
man,
you'd be willing to do again this week?
that's a great suggestion. If I could figure out a way to run the scores, I would do that. But even if I went on a site like ESPN and I put the scores, you would only see like 4 scores. You wouldn't be able to see them. Like if I could figure out a way to have them scroll to where the scores were on the screen or stats and all that, then I would do that.
Who cares about that? Just open it up and let us chat in there.
Okay. Maybe I'll try it.
Not bad. I was just wondering. All right, sir.
All right, Michael. Thank you so much.
All right, have a good one. See
You too.
Bye.
All right. Our night has come to an end here at the Voice of College Football after 2 hours and 40 minutes. Boy, we got to tighten these shows up. We got to make sure all of you get here on time. And maybe I need to do a little bit better with the notifications. I didn't schedule this until probably an hour and a half before we came on. So we're here every Tuesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night during college football season. So we had a small crowd tonight. Hopefully everyone's geared up toward Friday and then especially Saturday. Thanks to everyone for being here. And do we have any comments we need to hit? I don't see any. Thanks for being here. We'll be back on Friday. Check out our segments with Steve Merrill on all the team channels where we break down the betting edge on all these games. If you're interested in that, might be a little bit too late for me to post another preview video on anything. We had a bad week, as you know, from the moron who deleted all the videos and everything. So I wasted a lot of time dealing with that with YouTube. And so it's going to be my goal starting next week. It was going to be my goal starting this week to take about the 4 biggest games in college football and preview those. And actually way beyond that, because I'd like to produce a preview video of every game for all the team channels. And then maybe the 4 biggest games of the week on the main channel. So I got to make my predictions for this weekend. We got our first Power 5 game in the books with Virginia winning, and we will see everyone tomorrow night for our West Virginia show and then call-in show on a Friday night. Have a good Friday.